Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the August 5th Cincinnati School Board meeting to order. Treasurer Wagner, would you please call the attendance roll?
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mr. Crossett? Mr. Lindy?
Here.
Ms. Mapp? Here. Dr. Moffitt? Here. Vice President Weinberg? Here. President Bolton?
Present. Board Member Vice President Weinberg, would you please explain the virtual hearing of the public process?
I will do so. Members of the public who are online and wish to speak during our hearing of the public this evening may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your request for 5 minutes. If you would like a direct response to your question, please make sure to share your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion and a second to approve the August 5th business meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice President. Treasurer Wagner, would you please call the voting roll?
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett? Okay. Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
President Bolton?
Yes. Tonight's agenda is approved as posted. Well, now we are able to complete a work and job and effort that we began the last couple of weeks, and we're proud to move ahead on finally last week. And that is that we are now ready to render the oath of office to our newly selected appointed board member, James Crossett. Treasurer Wagner, would you please move forward with the oath for Mr. Crossett? And Mr. Crossett, would you please invite any of your guests that wish to join you or are being forced to join you against their will on down for the administration of the oath?
You get to come up on the stage.
It's on. There you go. Okay, so please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio. And that I will faithfully, honestly, and impartially discharge the duties of a board member of the Board of Education. Oh, sorry. Of the Cincinnati City School District.
Of the Cincinnati City School District.
Of the City of Cincinnati, Ohio, during my continuance in office.
Of the City of Cincinnati, Ohio, during my continuance in office.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Member Crossett, would you like to say a few words, and then we'll chime in after you've had your statement?
Got my notes.
All right.
My handwriting is terrible. I've been told it's like hieroglyphics. But yes, I wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight to support the Cincinnati Public Schools. That's great. And also I wanted to acknowledge all the other applicants. There were 20 other applicants. It was great response from the community to support the schools, and a lot of good people in that list as well. So I'm very honored and humbled and excited to have been selected. So I appreciate that very much. I want to thank the board. This is a very impressive board. You've got Kendra, who's creative. You've got Dr. Moffitt, who's got great national connections. Ben is very dedicated. Mary has got great classroom expertise. Brandon's got the higher ed perspective, which is very helpful. And of course, Eve, I'm pretty sure you're going to be in the Hall of Fame of Cincinnatians pretty soon. So thank you to the board. And I'm going to up my game and be sure that I can add value and contribute and collaborate. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Also, I wanted to thank the superintendent. I've heard that all good things, that you're doing a great job, so keep going. And then Jen Wagner, I've known Jen for many years from my service on the audit committee. I've said this many times, but we have been blessed with the best CFO in the city, whether it's a public entity or private business. Very fine CFO. Also, I wanted to thank my daughter, Eden, and Sincere for coming up with me. Eden Crossett is a media strategist at Procter & Gamble. And Sincere Williams, who came up, is going to be a freshman at Hughes High School. And Sincere and I are in a mentoring program through the Cincinnati Youth Collaborative. So I think that's pretty much all my comments, except I did want to say that I'm here to serve everyone, whether it's a teacher, a student, administrator, and be a servant leader. And if anybody is feeling frustrated or they're feeling like they can't make progress or it's just not working, I want to let people know that they can feel free to contact me. I know better than anyone that life can have unexpected. Give me a minute. So, but being positive, the power of positivity is and thinking about life with the glass half full is very powerful. And so if you call me or contact me, I will do my best to bring around you to a positive place where you can be heard and acknowledged, and also to try to restore your ability to imagine possibilities. So with that, I thank you all and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Member Crossett, welcome aboard. Do board members have particular comments they'd like to make? This would be the time. Finance Chair, of course. You're happy as probably anybody here.
I'm ecstatic to have Jim here. I think it's a great testament to the hard work that we did in this process, but also to the great quality of folks who were a part of that process. And so that we have Jim here now sitting with us, because this is a person who's dedicated a lot of his time to CPS through the audit committee. This is a person I have met many years ago at UC with the working at the law school, but he's dedicated his time to helping others and to doing a great job. And I think it's very great to have you here. And I look forward to bringing all of the great thoughts that you've brought to audit committee to the full board so that we can all hear them. But I'm really happy to have you here.
Vice President?
I just want to say welcome, and I look forward to working with you. I will keep it very short and sweet and simple.
Any others? Any other comments? Member Matt?
Yes, thank you. So I am ecstatic about working with you, Board Member Crossett. I think that you are truly a value add, and I think that you have so much to share in terms of policy as well as your background with the audit committee. So thank you for your service, not only for doing the work on the audit committee, but really being a testament and serving and showing up for our students. So thank you, and again, welcome.
Dr. Moffett?
So welcome is a consistent theme that I think everyone is saying, and I will definitely share my welcome to you. And I'm actually very excited that you will get an opportunity to see the schools and all the stuff that we're doing, the great things that are going on in CPS. But most importantly, you're gonna get 36,000 new little loves. So welcome on board, and I look forward to visiting schools with you and seeing the smile on your face and that you'll bring to some of our youngest ones. And now my favorites, I have no favorites, but my favorites are the littles. So spend some time with the preschool and preschool land and you will never stop smiling. So welcome on board.
Member Lindy.
Oh, I just echo my colleagues. Very excited you're here, Mr. Crossett. Looking forward to working together. I think you bring a level of experience and professionalism that is going to be great. So thank you.
Thank you all. And now we'll move on to some more business at hand, and we're still in the old business part of this. I know, Jim, you don't want to think of yourself as old business, but it was a continuation from the previous meeting. So that's why you're in that category. But old business, we have to do something by the end of August. We don't have to do it tonight, but we do need to begin a discussion tonight about a responsibility that we have to appoint our 5 members to the Preschool Promise Board of Managers. And if I can recall for all of you that when the Preschool Promise Board of Managers was created, United Way got 5 seats and we got 5 seats. And our 5 seats are staggered in terms. And so our 5 seats, there are 2 that are up and need to be replaced, restored, maintained, and by the 1st of September. And the 2 that are, one is currently held by it's a CFT seat. So the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers decides and recommends to us, and we can say no, but it's has not yet happened that we have ever said no to the recommendation. That seat is up, and actually the person that is currently in that seat is term limited. So we do need a new person for that CFT seat. We want to thank Laura Saint-Regret for all of her work in preschool and on the Board of Managers and her watchful eye throughout these many years in the preschool efforts that we've engaged with the community and with CPS and the private providers. But she is term limited, and we do have a name from the CFT as a replacement, and we will be getting more information about this person, but he's a lead teacher. He's a preschool teacher and kind of very well established. His name is Glenn Calhoun, and he has agreed based upon the appointment or recommendation from CFT. Then we also have a seat that we mentioned before 2 meetings ago, if I recall, and that is we have the seat that is to be occupied by a parent. And currently it's being occupied by former board member Pam Bowers, who is a mental health professional, and she is not term limited, and she has expressed some interest, if we want her to remain in the seat. And people have spoken very highly of the work that she has provided and the seniority, if you will, or experience that she has, because many of our other members of our 5 or less than 2 years. Like I think Marcia Futel has been there 2-3 years or so. Carolyn Jones is in her 1st year, and so there might be some interest in maintaining Pam Bowers. But we've also had a discussion and suggested perhaps, since Pam Bowers has done her great job of raising 2 great kids, she's not technically any longer a parent of a CPS child. And so there was interest in perhaps having other parents have the opportunity. And board members, you've received at least 3 names, and 1 has since withdrawn. And you can find information out about those 2 individuals, Bria Rummins and Ramika Smith. Christopher Bennett has withdrawn. So the choice, at least that we know of right now, are those three, either Pam Bowers remaining on the seat or being replaced by one of the other two that have been submitted by our own parent champions, as a suggestion from, as suggested by Member Moffett. So that's where we are. But what we do have to do tonight is change the original resolution creating our 5 seats. When we created the 5 seats, we don't know, we have to do it tonight, but we can do it next week as well if we have to. When we created the 5 seats, we had listed as one of the 5 seats, instead of just generically a lead agency coming from our community learning center efforts, we had listed it as Families Forward. Well, technically, Families Forward no longer exists as an entity, if you will, but more particularly, it was generically supposed to be a lead agency. So we will be changing that resolution and maintaining the 5 that we have. And then also next week or next meeting, we would have to choose the 2 people for the 2 seats that are up. We have also Ms. Futel is up next year, and in 2 years, our other 2 members or other 2 seats are up in 2 years. So that's the staggered term. Sorry it takes so long, but we got to get it right, because that's a valued partnership and a remarkable thing that was built by the community. Any questions about where we are, or do we have other names to add for consideration? Just asking. Seeing none, we will then move from that item on the agenda and plan, Ms. Davis, we'll have that resolution of appointment and resolution of changing the original 5. I do want to put one cute kind of comment in. When I was, well, Jim, you now also have been here almost as many years as I, but I will remember when this was all created. I can remember distinctly in room 1A when we had to come up with the 5 organizations. The first thing Mary Ronan said, it must be one of our lead agencies. And the first one she mentioned was Families Forward, because it was Debbie Alsop. And the reality was, since that was our first lead agency, Families Forward, that was her call. And so we also have the NAACP and CFT. We have Interact with Health and a parent representative. It's we're proud of what we've been doing, and we thoroughly appreciate the partnership that we've all established. Vice President?
Yes, so I do have a question in terms of the individual that we will select in that process. So currently we have a possibility of 4 names, not including the CFT seat. Is that correct? Well, 3 names.
3 names.
3 names. So based off of those 3 names, and I'm seeing now that we cannot add any other names, or are we?
We could.
Okay, so what would be the deadline in terms of, I know you said we needed to make this decision by September 1st, but in terms of, are we going to discuss the individuals, or what would be the process on choosing them?
I think it's a great valid question. Certainly, if there's others that would like to participate or have their names entered, or you have somebody to nominate, I think a week before the next meeting, so that it could be whatever resumes that they would want to put together, or we could submit. So our next board meeting is 26th.
The 26th.
26th, so a week before that, let's say somewhere around the 19th or whatever. If there are other folks interested in the community, would like to submit. You know, we've gone to the community to get a great new member. We're happy to go to the community to widen the interest as well. And we're very excited to see Mr. Bennett. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett's withdrawn, but that was personal initiative that he took. So we appreciate that. So and then we would be able to discuss, and we could probably discuss that in executive session, I think, prior to the next meeting, and come out here and be ready to nominate somebody after a public discussion, if that works for you all.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments, or ideas about that? All right. Treasurer Wagner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm supposed to give you an update on where we were with the budget. And so now that we've addressed the gap and entered all the recommendations into Alaview, which is the software that we use to build the budget, and we're in the process of updating the budget structure to align with the new organization. So we started running reports and doing analysis. I noticed that some of the old department names are still in place. And so we hope to bring the comprehensive consolidated budget to the 26th for adoption. We started adding the calculations, having the schools by the cost per student, but I'm also doing that for the central office departments. It's very interesting data. And so we'll bring that to you on the 26th. But I did want to mention I discovered last week that in comparing our state funding formula from the last payment in June for last fiscal year to this, our state share dropped 5.9%. I suspect it's because of the residential property values going up. But I have Kevin Ashley, our Director of Financial Transparency and Reporting, is doing an analysis on it. But that 5.9% could result in a $15 million revenue loss. If it stays, it's the beginning of the year, so don't panic yet. But it's something that we have to monitor and compare to the forecast. I'm sure Kevin had anticipated some because remember in the presentation we did with the property taxes, the state share is in reverse of, so when values go up, our state share goes down because we can become wealthier across the state. So I just didn't expect it to be that big. So we'll keep you informed and keep you monitoring with the progress, and we'll include that in the next presentation as well. But we've already started talking about next year's budget cycle. And so you will be hearing about the time frame in Finance Committee on the 16th. And very graciously, the Budget Task Force has agreed to do 2.0 and help redesign some parts of the budget and how we allocate the money out using the return on investment data, looking at all the formulas and trying to find a better way to do this process. So as soon as Finance Committee sets the timeline, we'll get restarted again on that. I also wanted to mention that Just Ask Jen topics are being collected. So there's a button on the website where you can suggest topics. And so those are the first Just Ask Jen session is September 3rd. I don't know why I said June. So those are the biggest updates. In addition to working on the budget, we've been working on the ad hoc growth plan, and board members have been asking about costs. And so we've created there's this huge team that meets almost on a weekly basis to make all the moves for this year, phase 1. So this document that's in front of you or up on the screen has 3 tabs according to the phases that Superintendent Murphy introduced a couple of board meetings ago. And so we're tracking all the different costs. Right now, these are estimates. For example, in the staffing one of them includes an assistant principal at Mount Washington, but instead of being a new position, it should have been a moved position. So that might not be an increased cost. So we're validating all that stuff now. I just wanted to let you see how we're tracking the costs by category. So it's either overtime labor to move boxes and furniture, or if we have to buy new technology or new curriculum to expand at a school. And then on the bottom section those are the topics that are planning for next year's action plans. So if there's costs associated early, we can start tracking those. So we're working to incorporate this into the budget as well. But I just wanted to see, this is a work in progress. It changes, updated. We're getting quotes in, we're adding information to it. So it's a living, breathing document, and we'll continue to share that as well.
Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. Do any members have questions or points of clarification or need to express some views or direction to the treasurer, Member Moffett? Then we'll go over to Finance Chair.
So thank you for this. To be honest with you, when you said $15 million revenue loss, I kind of checked out for a second and I'm checking back in. So by chance, could that possibly be an error? I know that you said you had the assistant treasurer looking into that. What is the likelihood that that number is going to remain accurate. And as we prepare for our budget, moving forward, that's a significant loss in revenue. Could we possibly consider having an addendum to Just Ask Jen to talk about that to the community and share again what the school funding formula is and how we are demonstrating the 5.9% decrease? I just think that the more we educate, the better we would be in the long run. And that's a huge loss. It's not like 1 or 2 million. It's a huge loss.
Yeah, so I don't know how close it is to a mistake or not. I haven't been able to dig into the details, but that's what's unfortunate about the way the state does their business, because normally we would have already adopted our budget that relied on that revenue. So it came in July. It was the July #2 payment is what showed the reduction, the state share reduction. So, and yes, absolutely, doing a Just Ask Jen on this topic is perfect. Happy to do it.
Finance Chair?
So I think, again, thank you, Jen, for giving us this update. I think one of the things that I want to hit on first is just that this is how ridiculous our state funding system works. Because the school could have passed a budget based on what they projected to have, made their decisions, made heavy costs to do those decisions, and then be told you're going to get $15 million less. And that's absolutely ridiculous, absolutely insane. But that is how our funding system works. And every 2 years, it'll be even more crazy because they'll have different legislature who will make different priorities to how they want to do that. And I think that's one of the big things that it's very difficult. I know the conversation we're going to have tomorrow with our city partners has to also recognize this, because we're looking at property values that are causing what the true conversation about our budget and what who our students are to look very different. So, I mean, nothing's changed about how wealthy our students are in the last year. The thing that has changed is that we have property values that are higher. And so that is it's just a conversation point that we continuously have to keep having, but also recognizing that has an effect on where our students go to school, how our students live in our district, and how our students have access to resources based on funding from our state. So I appreciate you kind of bringing it to our attention, but also I think this is a conversation that long-term our state reps need to do better to make sure that our students have the appropriate funding. I also just want to kind of stress also, this is why we're going to have the conversation in budget, this coming up meeting, to set a plan for it so we can kind of calendar out, because there's going to be really, really hard decisions this next year's budget. We took a lot of fat out of the budget. We took a lot of things out of the budget just to get to where we are this year. And unfortunately, nothing gets cheaper the next year, right? So I don't imagine us having, I don't think paper's going to get cheaper. I don't think equipment's going to get cheaper. I would love it if buses said, hey, guess what? We won't charge you for gas anymore. But they're not. Like, it's just not the reality. And so I think that is even why it's more important for us to be having that conversation early so that we can be prepared to make some of those hard choices earlier and have those hard conversations earlier so that we can give clear direction to you all and so that we can actually do things that make a difference still. And so I just wanted to, again, thank you for providing it and just putting that on our agenda to think about for our next budget and finance and growth meeting.
Thank you very much. Other members have questions or comments? Mr. Crossett.
On this chart that's on the screen there, the biggest dollars are in staff. And so what you're saying is to make more efficient use of the buildings, it creates the need for more staff? Or is staff just moving with the students?
So I'll give you an example. It's a great question. So we moved the K-8 students that were at Riverview, we moved them to Mount Washington. And because our budget is built on staffing formulas, because the number of students increased at Mount Washington, they then qualified for an assistant principal. But where those kids came from should have reduced and maybe lost an assistant principal. So it should just been a move instead of a grow. So that's what we have to factor. But one of the we're creating a new building, a new middle school. And so that might drive an increase in staff because you're losing efficiencies with a smaller building as you start up.
So are any of these costs in the staff category one time, or would they be ongoing?
I'm imagining staffing would be ongoing.
Ongoing? Okay, I'm just curious. I mean, I think it's really good that we're taking advantage of our space as best we can. And so I applaud that, but was just curious about the process. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yep.
For the, I'll do just a couple and I'll get right over to you. Just help me with the, addressing the gap, which we've now addressed. Now we're talking in terms of, you kind of mentioned two different budgets. You mentioned the budget for this year we're in, and that's what we're addressing. And then also a budget process as we get ready for not 25, but indeed 26.
Correct.
So,
We can't continue to do business the way we're doing it because we won't be able to fund it that way.
okay.
So we have to do things differently.
And so we want to change our process, but I do think it is not as a process change, but just to your point, and you've been saying this for a number of years, we have to do what we do differently because we are not sustainable at this level. And you mentioned, and I love those charts that you all produce that says the cost per student by building or by department, will all of that be, as you said, will that be at the August 26th when we get ready to actually do an appropriations?
Yes. It'll be all presented as a packet
Okay.
to be adopted.
It's also so critical, Ms. Burkhart, the by school transportation costs. I mean, when you look at it, that's that Rosetta Stone about what we can't sustain any longer. So to the way of drilling down to school, and I know that's something that Dr. Moffett has hit for 2 years, especially in finance and other areas. So I know finance will be working on that. Any other questions as we go over to member map?
Yes,
Member
thank
Matt.
you. So thank you for providing this, this chart. I really appreciate it to really identify where we're spending or allocating the funds. I do have a question about the curriculum. So has there been it's noted that Mount Washington has 17,000 essentially for curriculum. Is that because the students moved from Riverview and moving over to Mount Washington has been an increase with like materials, I'm assuming?
I believe it's because it's a change in the curriculum that they use, that yes, because they adopted, accepted much more students, they just needed to buy some more curriculum. Is that correct?
Okay. And then the other areas for Old Lighthouse for furniture and supplies is a question mark there. So can we expound on what the unknowns are for that area?
Yes, we're waiting for quotes to come in. Nobody knew exactly. They wanted lockers and bookshelves. And so they're waiting for the quotes to come in. I put a question mark there to help remind me I'm waiting on information.
Okay. And then the last part was about the planning activities. I know that you spoke about this is something that's coming down the pipeline and it's in phases. And I think you said there's 3 tasks that's associated with the chart or the planning of this, and I didn't catch it. So I just wanted to check in and verify what those 3 tasks are.
So
And-
Rob, could you click to the second? So there's 3 tabs at the very bottom, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and they're organized by the presentation that Superintendent Murphy did on the growth timeline. Right. And so in 1 year, we're making things happen in 1 year, but we're also planning. The bottom section is what we're planning for the following year. And then you go to the second tab, the planning items become the action items, and then the planning for the 3rd year. So it's a way to keep track of current costs and then potential costs moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this.
You're very
visual.
welcome.
Any other comments, questions, points of clarification? Thank
Ju-
you.
just-
Yes, sir.
So, and to follow on with Kendra, looking out to the future, some of these schools maybe will be able to, because we're utilizing the facilities better, their enrollment would increase. And would that mean that we would get more dollars because enrollment goes up?
If the district's enrollment goes up, we would get more dollars. But the problem is we'll only get more dollars for the state. We don't get more dollars from property taxes because that doesn't grow with enrollment. So that extra child only gets funded at $36 on the dollar. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? All right. Good. We will then move on. New business. Before we go to the interim superintendent, do any members have any acknowledgements or announcements that they'd like to share tonight? These once were called kudos. And they can still be kudos. Any members have any acknowledgements or announcements or kudos to share? Mr. Craig.
So I want to give a really high kudos to everybody who worked really hard for the back to school event that happened on Saturday. When I stopped by, there were so many folks that were there. There was so much hard work going on. And it was so great to see so many of our community partners still be involved. From what I heard, there were folks who were there before we got there waiting on us, which tells us that we are doing something correct. But it's also an example of how we are using positive messages for our district, which is something we have been working hard to do. And I want to really especially shout out a lot of folks who are doing it on less. So I know, like, for instance, our communications and marketing team are doing it on less. And that's a really impressive thing. And I think our central office staff is doing it on less. And we so often talk about in our budget time about where we can cut from as if it's really easy to just remove a person and then everything would work great. These folks are working so hard every day to make sure everything looks seamless. And so I was really excited and happy. I was able to just pop in and have my good little time and not do anything. So it was great as a board member. Other than the superintendent made me go up and use a microphone. But no, it's fine. But I really it was a great feeling. It was a great vibe. And even as folks were shutting things down, there were still a ton of people and really enjoying themselves and having a great time. So it was a great event.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Other comments? So Mr. Lindy.
Thank you, President Bolden. I got a nice update from interim superintendent about the Olympics, and that we have 2 alumni from Cincinnati Public Schools who are competing in the Olympics. I think that's outstanding. So I wanted to offer congratulations to Aiken alum Carleek Jones, who, as I understand it, is participating in the first ever South Sudan Olympic basketball team. And Walnut Hills graduate Nina Castagna is a member of the USA rowing team. So congratulations. Thank you for representing CPS. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Other announcements or acknowledgements from our members? We good? All right. Then interim superintendent, do you have some announcements and also some retirements, I guess?
Well, yes. So my announcements our board members have taken advantage of. So we'll start with the retiree. Thanks, Rob. So a couple of certificated personnel retirees
Oh, my
from
goodness.
Midway School, Nancy R. Hodges, and from Woodward Career Technical High School, science teacher extraordinaire Richard J. Knudsen. Our civil service retiree from Covedale School, Andrew Packard. He is a student services assistant. We deeply appreciate your years and time of service. So on my kudos slide, Rob, if you don't mind, won't spend much time here as board member Lindy talked
Stole
about.
your thunder.
My thunder or vice president's thunder, Callie Jones, and also our rowing team member, Nina. And so we're very proud of both of those graduates. Thank you for representing. And then my other thunder from board member Craig, I tell you, I do want to pause here. I can't say how proud of that day I am for a lot of different reasons. But one, I will tell you that Miss Rolanda Smith and LaRonda Thomas, you get in trouble when you start calling names, but I really must. This was not in the scope of their assigned work, but because of their love and appreciation in wanting this district to do well, they stepped up like crazy. It was so well organized. There was so much laughter among children, and parents and caregivers getting the resources they needed. Our partners they were there. There was a whole zone of partners. There was an elementary school zone. There were book bags. There was food for kids. There was a high school zone. Every department stepped up from the setup to the tear down. And I'm deeply appreciative of everyone who gave up their Saturday time to do this and to work so hard in putting it together. If it is anything like what we can expect the rest of this school year, it is going to be absolutely amazing. So I deeply appreciate everyone who participated Saturday.
Good job.
Oh, I do have one that no one mentioned. So this was amazing too. So last week, every year, the Reds Community Fund, they choose a community to do a makeover. So this year, it was the community of Bond Hill. Imagine that.
Wait, did you have anything
I
to
had
do with it?
absolutely
Bond
nothing
Hill
to do
girl?
with that. No, but I'm so excited.
Making sure.
Bond Hill Academy, Principal Crawford, they did benefit from this community makeover. And if you get a chance to go and see their new playground, oh my goodness. They had crews of people making beds to give to young children who needed a bed. They gave out supplies. They have a mural that has been made by a local artist that will go up. And it was just absolutely amazing. Redoing their STEM lab, all done by community support and driven. This took place last Thursday. Absolutely amazing. So thank you to the Reds Community Fund, P&G, the Cincinnati Zoo, and Children's and GE Aerospace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes then, oh, yeah.
I have a kudo too.
All right,
Oh,
Treasurer
okay.
Wagner.
Yes, I wanted,
Oh, we got another money kudo?
yes. I wanted to give a kudo and a shout out to the technology team and particularly Bernice Riga. We just received our E-rate audit, was very clean. But she had to invest a lot of time teaching these auditors how to do all about the E-rate program. And she's done a great job. She's one of a kind. So kudos to Bernice for delivering us a good audit.
Ah. I'm not gonna ask the audience because everybody's got a kudo now. Such good stuff is happening, but if that concludes that, the chair is yours, Madam Vice
All
President.
right. We are now at the item on our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will address all comments to the presiding officer. If you are online, once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. You should click on the camera icon to go interactive, provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a response to any questions that you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each person will have 2 minutes to speak. When the loud timer, and we do apologize for that, the sound will be a little loud, but when the timer goes off, your time is up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. And after speaking, if you're online, you'll briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners. So tonight, I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson, do we have any wonderful callers online?
To the Vice Chair, we do not have any online callers this evening.
All right, so we do not have any callers online, but we do have 2 present today. So once your name is called, if you could please come on down to the 2 chairs here near the podium. First up, we have Joanne Morse, and then we have Julie Sellers. Thank you so much for being here, and you can go ahead and begin.
Thank you. Thank you to the board. Interim Superintendent. My name is Joanne Morse. I live in the neighborhood of Walnut Hills, and I volunteer regularly at Frederick Douglass School, used to at Spencer, maybe continue, maybe at Owens in the fall, and also at SEPA. I was really glad at the last meeting to see the plan for the rollout of the things that, and included in that the opportunity for community engagement. So thank you for that. When those sessions are held, oh, and also to the treasurer, thank you. Wow, some numbers. This is great. However, what I didn't see on that chart was the savings for the plan changes. And when the sessions are held, when those community sessions are held, and they're going to be tough, we know that, I'd really like to make sure that we have clear goals and as much as possible tie those to clear measures. It's always easier when we're dealing with these kinds of changes to know what we're trying to do and to tie that to something specific, especially in terms of measures. So that's just my comment. Again, thank you for all you work, and I look forward to talking to you.
Thank you so much. Up next, we actually have Joshua Jasper. You can go ahead and come over to the mic, followed by Julie Sellers.
Greetings, Superintendent Murphy, esteemed board members, and everyone else in attendance tonight. My name is Joshua Jasper. I was a building sub for Roseland Condon Elementary last year, and August 14th will mark my 4th year in education. I attend Central State University, relentlessly encouraging students of all shades of melanin to consider the possibilities of pursuing a culturally rooted education at an HBCU. College is a great vehicle to move young adults into economic mobility, but it is not the only way to achieve this status. I stress the importance of trade skills to my students to open their minds to alternate pathways of success. I apply myself to be my best to identify positive qualities in my students, therefore igniting confidence in their own abilities to build a future from their own attributes and experiences. No matter the circumstance, every student has a purpose and should be told how worthy they are of having a positive and fruitful life. This past February, Superintendent Wright launched the first Black Male Educator Summit in Cincinnati, Ohio. This event was impactful and sparked a higher sense of accountability within men in our district. The next school day after the summit, I made an announcement at Roseland Condon Elementary to encourage my younger male students to consider the benefits of being a teacher. It was an honor to enter the lunchroom that day and have my boys cheering me on from grades 4th through 8th. They made it a point to express their excitement to go to college and become teachers. Nationally, Black male educators make up less than 1.3% of the education workforce. My goal is to create a pipeline in Cincinnati Public Schools that focuses on engaging middle school students to become the next generation of teachers. I am in the infancy stages of developing an organization that supports and provides leadership training, curriculum-based instruction that keys in on social and emotional wellness, culturally responsive pedagogy, economics, morals and integrity, financial literacy, and participating in planned community service events. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much. And our last speaker, Julie Sellers.
Good evening, members of the board. I just would like to say that this past week was the new hire orientation, and I was able to spend a couple different days with the new hires. There are so many great new hires coming in this year, and they are coming from all over the country to CPS and all over the Cincinnati area. And it's because they are excited. They were thrilled that they were hired by CPS. The one guy, he's young, he has a young family with a couple small children. And I said, so where are you from? And he said, New York City. I said, well, why did you come here? He said, because I can actually have a house here. And so last year I talked to people from Utah and she said, I had 3 criteria of what I wanted where I was going to live because in Utah, they're having huge water droughts. She said, my number 1 criteria was that there was plenty of water and they weren't living in a drought. Number 2, she wanted affordable housing. And number 3, she wanted to live in an urban area with the unions because she knew she would have a life that she could afford. And she has been so thrilled, but it's amazing, these young teachers, how they are able to research and they have come to conclusions that they want to come to Cincinnati Public. I also met a lot of people who are excited to come to Cincinnati Public because in other years, they did not get hired and they are now being hired from charter schools in our area and voucher schools from our area. And they are thrilled that they get to work for CPS. I mean, I have never met so many happy young teachers. And I would like to say to the whole board that CFT is encouraged that the board has been able to come together to select and appoint a new board member. And we welcome Mr. Crossett. So welcome to the board. The other thing I would like to make sure I let everybody know is CFT has recently began hosting a weekly radio show on WAVE, and it's 88.3 on the FM dial. It's every Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. During the afternoon drive time. And of course, we're going to be discussing everything education or labor issues. So we would like to invite Mr. Crossett to be on the show to introduce him to the city because a lot of people are like, who is this new person? So if you would be available, it's right on McMillan in Walnut Hills. It's right down the street.
We are charging you commercial time, President.
Is that
Sellers.
commercial time? So, but anyway, so if you would like to, and then we'll open that to other people. But we will be discussing everything education, including this financial stuff that we're hearing because, you know, it's all because of the abatements. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have come to the end of hearing of the public, and thank you so much to the individuals who spoke today.
Thank you, Vice President. Tonight's presentations will be from our CPS administration, and I know Interim Superintendent Murphy and Treasurer Wagner also have guests as well for some of the presentations. So if you'll take the chair, so to speak, and introduce our guests, and we'll get ready and write down our questions.
Yes, ma'am. We'll start with Mr. Burkhart coming to the podium. And we have at least a couple of our friends from Metro. I think the presentation may start with Yellow Bus, however.
Okay, Yellow Bus. I get my twitch. Okay, I'm ready.
So good evening. So yes, as Superintendent Murphy said, we're going to start a little bit with the Yellow Bus and then transition to Metro. So this is going to be a comprehensive transportation update. I've got my transportation hat on for this. So as we say in transportation, buckle in. So I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain here. We imported our data on July 11th, and that happened without incident, into our routing software. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that to kind of give you a little peek behind the curtain on why this date matters. So from July 11th till the end of July, we have approximately 15 working days to route all 36,000 students, both in our district as well as non-public and charter students. And so that 15 days is really all hands on deck. Prior to that July 11th, we're actually building what that structure looks like. So building the structure of what school start times are, and those are start times all throughout the city of Cincinnati, including our charter and non-public schools. So when July 11th happens, we begin the process of routing all of our students, not only routing them, but also linking buses together. So we have two tiered start times. So we want to make sure that the buses that start out 7:40 then have a bus to link to at 8:50. Again, the buses at 8 o'clock then have a bus to link to at 9:10. I can say with a smile on my face today that all students are routed as of today. And so that's a good news for us. And so when I say that all students are routed, we all know that students are going to change schools, students are going to register, and we're going to have some back and forth here between now and the start of school. But as of today, all of our students who are in the system are currently routed. As of this morning, all of our bus vendors received their routing sheets. And so from now until the start of school, they will begin their dry runs or their service runs, not only to get familiar with the route that they have chosen, but also to make sure that they assess every single stop. So they're going to make 2 service runs between now and the start of school to make sure that they put eyes on every single stop that we have within the city. Next slide, please. Another update is CPS will operate again our internal call center starting from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Families can contact the call center by dialing 513-363-RIDE. I'm going to say that again because I bumbled it. 513-363-RIDE. And anytime from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. you will get a live human. Please be patient on the first couple of days of school. I would also encourage everyone to look into their Focus account to see the transportation lookup. All that information is current, so I would encourage them to stop there first. But obviously, we have folks on staff ready for those calls. Another change we have for this year, and no surprise from last meeting, is our 7th and 8th graders on Metro. I'll go back to that July 11th when I talked about how previous to the rollover of data into our VersaTrans system that we set up all of our parameters for the school year. Well, on July 15th, we kind of put that on its head and changed up some things. So we were actually able to, even though our goal was by August 1st to have all the students routed, even with all the major changes that we had on July 15th, we were still by today, this morning, we're able to have all the students routed. So a little bit of a delay, but still got the job done. During the routing process, we did have one hiccup. And so I just wanted to talk about that briefly. We had about 260 of our special ed students who were entered incorrectly for transportation. So we know that our special ed students are our most vulnerable students in the district. And a lot of them have very, very specific and very, very special transportation from home to school, a lot of times curb to curb. And so in a lot of those situations, we have worked around in our system how to make sure that we make that happen on every single occasion. And we realized that as we did the migration this year, that we had a lot of notes and a lot of things that weren't in the system that needed to be carried over. So we did spend a lot of time looking at those students, making sure that those routes and those curb to curb and those school or home to school routes were taken care of with a lot of diligence. So I just wanted to bring that up and say that our transportation team really went above and beyond to make sure that our most vulnerable students had the most care in this process. Next slide, please. Also, our charter and non-public schools, also they're required to enroll their students in Focus. This is a good time to say at the beginning of the school year, we always have calls from our non-public and charter families. We need to make sure that the school that they are going to enrolls them in our system. So we would love to route them in our transportation software, but if they're not showing up as a student, we can't route them until they actually show up. And that is not instantaneous. Usually it takes at least one day for those schools to put those students in the system. And then the next day we will then see them and begin routing them. So public service announcement here. If you register on the first day of school, we won't automatically see those students in our system to be able to route them. There is a little bit of a lag there. All those students will be routed accordingly. I know at our last conversation, there was a question about Don's charter schools. So I provided a update here. As of 7:30 or July 30th, we did get a list of sites from Doane that were approved by the Ohio Department of Education or DEW. But they have not enrolled any students into our system yet. So their schools do not start until the beginning of September. So we do have some time, but we don't know the scope and breadth of how many students will be utilizing our transportation, i.e. Metro, for this coming school year. Next slide, please. Switching gears to Metro. So all schedules are available via Google Maps and the Transit app, and that was as of August 1st. So if any families are out there and looking to see what the route from home to school is, just a friendly reminder is they must choose a school day to look that up. So if they go into Google, for example, it might default to today, or if you're doing it over a weekend, it might default to a weekend day. You have to make sure you go in and choose an actual school day for the actual date and information to show up. Metro staff will be available at all high school open houses to provide family support. That is the same time that we will be passing out Metro cards to all the students who need them. I'm also happy to say that we've received all the Metro cards except for one school in our office this morning. And I understand that the last school was coming in this afternoon. I'm sorry I wasn't able to check on that before I came to the meeting, but we are very, very happy that we have all those in hand and we'll be able to share those with each campuses. Metro will not have any flash passes anymore. And so each of their passes, including the extracurricular, will work with the fare box. There will not be just a pass that they show the driver like in the past. These are actually passes that will work with the fare box. Just so everyone's aware, passes will be active from 6:30 in the morning till 5:30. And that is an hour less than it was in previous years. Our extracurricular passes will be available till 10:30. Again, another service that Metro is providing is allowing parents to ride with their son or daughter from August 14th through August 23rd at no charge. So at any time during that time frame, parents can ride to and from the school at no charge. Next slide, please. Also to talk about Metro's on the boots on the ground. Metro will also be available at high schools for dismissal and major transfer points and transit centers as we get schools up and running. Families may or may not see a Metro person actually right there at their campus, but they will be roving between campuses and be able to answer questions and solve any issues that come up. Last year, we Metro added two crosstown routes, number 22 and number 36, which will alleviate some of the congestion at Government Square and provide students a more direct travel from home to their school. I know in previous meetings, we asked about the number of students who have been at Government Square. Back in January of 2019, pre-COVID, we had approximately 190 students who were transversing Government Square. January of 2024, it was about 203. So we actually have some data to show that we are about on par with what it was pre-COVID. Next slide, please. As I said, an update for Metro is no more flash passes. All CPS passes, including extracurricular, will work with the fare box. CPS and Metro are coming up with ridership expectations. And so we've put together a document for all riders of Metro, whether it be CPS or non-CPS students, on what our expectations for both Metro and yellow bus ridership should look like. Metro will also provide CPS a listing of students who transverse Government Square who do have a more direct route. So if they're going through Government Square and they don't need to, we will get a listing weekly from Metro, and we will be able to provide that to school leadership as well as make robocalls to those families to say, those parents and caregivers, to say that that student does not need to go through Government Square and that we should have some conversations around that. So with that, that was my presentation. I hope happy to answer any questions.
Yes, do board members have questions and follow-up, Vice President?
Yes, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to start with the Metro questions first, and then we'll
Yeah.
head back to the yellow buses.
And our friends from Metro are here too, so if you would
Oh,
like to ask
perfect.
them as well.
Yeah.
So
I-
just to go a little further onto slide 7,
Yeah.
can you just explain what's the fare box? Explain that.
Yeah.
Just really quick.
I'll let the experts, but the fare box really is, before, we used to have cards that all the student had to
Right.
do was actually just show the card to the driver and then get on. This actually will go through their card reader system and read the card so that they know, each is going to be more of a smart card versus just a generic card. So please,
That's exactly right. And one of the benefits of having the RFID smart card on the fare box is it allows us to control passes, right? So
Okay.
that we know that that pass is associated with the student. Every pass has a unique number that is tied to a student number. That's how we work with your transportation folks to make sure that it's being used appropriately by that student. When you have flash passes out in the community, people make photocopies. They can hand them to people that aren't CPS
There you
students,
go.
so on and so forth. So overall, we've been working very well and very hard with Mr. Burkhart and your transportation department to create more controls and a more accurate accounting of use of the system.
Okay, that's great to hear. And in terms of the weekly list, regarding students who possibly, I actually was going to ask that question, what, is being put into place to stop students from going down to wherever they're going or getting on whatever buses when they know that they're not supposed to. So, my follow-up question to that would be, let's say we have a particular group of students who, for example, they make that weekly list. Is there going to be a warning? I know you said that you would do a robocall. It would be up to the particular school whatsoever. What if this is like a repeat offense? What will happen? And then a follow-up to that as well, the CPS Metro expectations, will we see that? Is that printed somewhere? Will that be shared out?
yeah, so answer the second question first. Yes, it will be shared out. It will be on our website, I think, believe starting tomorrow. So we have that, and we could actually share it with the board previous to
Yes,
that so
please.
that you have a copy of those expectations. It is not very different from the expectations that we have on our website right now. What we did do that is different is we had our set of expectations for yellow bus. Metro had their set of expectations for Metro riders. And what we did is we combined them together. So it's one document that shares all of the expectations regardless of what color bus you ride, whether it's yellow or Metro, that there's same expectations for both of those. And the first part of the question was whether or not there was a progressive discipline, if you
Yeah, so
will.
if they're
Right.
repeat offenders, for example, which I hope that we're not going to have that. So what would be the next steps after that?
Yeah, so we haven't gotten that deep in the weeds in our initial conversations with this. We were looking at the code of conduct and following the code of conduct on those infractions. Obviously, if someone just rides and goes through Government Square versus something that happens at Government Square are two different types of infractions. So we haven't gotten to the point where we've listed out what those infractions are, but our initial conversation is following the code of conduct.
Okay, and then I have a couple of questions about the yellow bus. Are we still doing the combined routes with some of the yellow buses for the schools? I know we did that last year. So
Yeah,
are we still doing that?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. And in some cases, one of the items that passed early in the process of finding closing the budget gap was looking at the high schools and how we could put some of the seventh graders together on a bus for different campuses. So we started doing that in what I call leading up to our transportation rollover on the 11th. And so we had that set up and then we backed that off because we didn't need to now that those 7th and 8th graders went to Metro. So we do have some, believe we have one CPS in charter school that is combined. And I believe we have 8 other charter schools that share a bus together.
Okay.
So we're constantly looking at that as we look at how efficient we are with the routing. Let me back up and say every year it's just a little bit different. It really doesn't matter on the first we'll call it 49 students on the bus. But once you add the 50th and the 51st, you then have to look at whether or not the bus can hold that additional student. And then that may require a different bus, which then requires us to reroute other students for efficiencies. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to ask the board for guidance as we continue down that process.
Perfect. And I have one final question. Just because I know I get lots of emails from parents regarding the start of school and it's dark and they are so worried about their child standing at the bus stop. So my question to you all would be, have you, with the fact of looking at some of these stops, have you received any complaints, whether it's from last year or this year, in terms of looking at the position of some of these stops and the safety concerns in regards to the pedestrians, which are our kids?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I want to say our bus drivers, both our yellow bus vendors, bus drivers and Metro, all go out of their way to make sure that all the stops are as safe as possible. We on our yellow bus routes, we will get a note from a driver that's passed along with daily huddles with our bus vendors that happen both in the morning and at midday to find out if anything has changed. So we're able to get that information to our transportation team in real time. And we have actually a transportation individual who will go out and audit that bus stop as well to get boots on the ground to see if there is something wrong. So we do have a process in place for that. And if there is a bus stop that needs to be moved for whatever reason, let's say there's construction going on, there's construction equipment, the yellow bus vendor will let us know in the morning. We'll get eyes on it, and by the afternoon or by the next day, we'll be able to move that stop. So it's a pretty fluid process that we can move that stop. To answer your question, we haven't moved many stops, but it's a fluid process all year. So what may move for a period of time due to construction may move back after that construction is done.
Okay, thank you so much.
Other questions? Mr. Crossan?
With the yellow bus service, do you have any concerns about whether or not they have enough drivers?
So if you were to ask me on July 14th, I would have said yes. Now that we have moved a vast majority of students to Metro, I'm not going to say that we're out of the woods, but it surely lessens the need for drivers. If I were to ask all the bus vendors what the hardest part of their job is, they'll tell you hands down it's getting bus drivers just in the pipeline. Once they get in the pipeline, the job, I'm not saying the job is easy, but it's easier. But getting those folks to just come in and say, I want to drive a school bus or a Metro bus is really the most difficult part of the job. I think I did a presentation last year that said that we need 50,000 new CDL drivers every year across all platforms. And so that's not going away anytime soon. The latest studies have shown we're only getting approximately 20 to 30 per year. So every year we're in a deficit of 20 to 30,000 bus drivers or CDL drivers, if you will.
Mr. Lindy?
Thank you, President Bolton, and thank you, Mr. Burkhart, friends at Metro. I really appreciate it. I think just taking a step back for a second, I think the biggest change this year is we've gone from a world where our 7th and 8th graders had the option to be on the yellow bus to a world where all 7th and 8th graders, if they need bus transportation, they're going on the Metro. And the rationale for that was we were trying to close our budget gap. We made a lot of other cuts first. This was the piece that got us all the way to the finish line. That is until we learned about the $15 million revenue shortfall we have this evening. But this was a hard decision, and a decision that is, I think, the biggest change from last year. I still think this was the right call. I voted for this when former Superintendent Wright suggested it in February. I voted for it again at our last meeting in July. I think the biggest concern I have is just the timing and how little time there's been for families in particular, I think, to prepare for this kind of change, but also for us at CPS. We received this letter from the city a few weeks ago that I found just very concerning because it was quite clear about how worried they were about student safety, particularly downtown, with this change. And they said there was a particular concern because of how little time they had to prepare. It sounds like they were actually pretty surprised when we voted on this, and that they really hadn't had much advance notice about it at all. They asked us for like 3 very specific things for CPS to do. And I was curious if we could get an update on whether or not we're able to do those things that the city was asking for. They were asking about assigning CPS staff to Metro buses. They were asking about having CPS staff at the transit centers. And they were asking, you addressed this a little bit, a communication of behavior standards to parents and guardians. So are we able to do the things that the city said was necessary?
We, without a doubt, can provide the expectations to the children and the families. It gives me pause, great pause, to ask our staff to be at Government Square, to be on the Metro buses, to be at the transit centers, because we don't have authority to govern those spaces. So that gives me great pause.
So I appreciate that answer. And I think that certainly makes sense, Interim Superintendent. I think my concern is just that we're setting up the city and families for a no-win situation. I think this is the right decision. I still think it's the right thing for us to do. I think that I wish we had done this when it was originally suggested back in February, so that there was more time to get a good plan in place. I think my major concern is just that, families and kids be okay after the school day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. You want to follow up?
I do. Thank you. And thank you for the question and the concern. Certainly, it's obvious given the increase of the 7th and 8th graders, and many of them probably new in their families as well. Just to speak a little bit to our efforts surrounding Government Square. So particularly in the PM peaks, but certainly in the AM as well, we increase our supervisory presence at Government Square. That includes supervisors on foot, walking from areas A to C and around those several blocks, that area there. We work with CPD to have our own police detail on site at Government Square. They work at Metro's direction. They deal with issues at Government Square, including any rider questions, issues, matters of safety concern, and the like. I'll reiterate again, our team's presence at the open houses at the start of a school year. We get down to a very individualized level. So with the student, with the families, with the parent, how do I route? How do I use Metro's system to get from my place of origin to the school and back and forth? But it doesn't stop with the start of the school year. If there's any parent, any family, any student concerned about how you ride Metro, confusion about how to do that, past questions, routing, et cetera, we don't stop. Chris and team, our team at Metro as well. So that doesn't exactly speak to the concerns raised that you mentioned in the city letter, but it certainly speaks to our effort throughout the school year to make sure that nobody is navigating the system confused or feeling unsafe or otherwise.
Dr. Moffat?
So thank you for the presentation, because you've offered a lot of information, both Yellow and Metro. And I do have a couple of questions for you gentlemen, so don't go far. But I also wanted to share, in preparation for our joint meeting tomorrow with the city, we were able to get a little bit of information to my colleague's point around the letter that was sent and their desire to want to work with CPS more intimately before we talked about that letter, which clearly we've now not done. But thank you for that candor. Which leads me to several of my questions. And I will say too, again, thank you for being willing to work with the city. Thank you for being willing to work with us. But I want to clarify that when you say active passes with limited times, we had a discussion last year under the previous administration, and I'm told that there was, and I did send the board members reports that we got that was under the previous administration as well, so they can read it, of discussions and things that were asked, and that the board was unaware of some of those responses. So if you could just kind of give us a little bit of enlightenment. I'm happy to see that the number from 2019 of 190 versus 2024 of 204 is relatively similar. But we specifically asked if the active times of the passes could include having limitations during the day. So for instance, if if a school starts at 8:30 and students are arriving, 9 o'clock, clearly after school hours, could we have limitations of that pass so that the passes expire at a specific time, giving them limited access, or they can pay for that, but it wouldn't be, a CPS cost. And likewise, if school doesn't conclude until 2:30, then in theory, we really shouldn't have any passes to be active before 2 o'clock. So can we limit those things? And so that's one of my questions for you all. I'm going to give you all my questions and then you can kind of answer them because there's quite a few. And then the other one, we also asked about having limited routes. I'll give you an example. If a student, because we do have a citywide enrollment, if a student lives in the Price Hill area and they choose to go to Withrow, could they only take routes that go to that direction and not have the ability to take routes that might give them access across the city? Is your technology able to limit them because they're kids? They're going to do what they do. So can we provide some provisions for our students electronically? That's another question. Additionally, I'm concerned about punishing students that go downtown because they can go downtown. I want to have some clear expectations of students who go downtown and cause trouble versus students who just happen to want to go downtown and meet their mom for dinner or whatever. Identification of students that are in altercations is going to be our discussion around the collaboration. But how do we, since the passes are now electronic, how do we know if they don't have a picture that that particular pass was that student's? So let's say I've lived this, so I'm not telling you anything that's all theory. I find a pass, someone's pass on the floor outside their locker, and I lost my pass. I don't want to pay $10 for it, so I take their pass. Now I'm all over the city. That happens. They're kids. They're going to do what they do. So how do we identify that that particular pass goes to that student if they did not report it as stolen and lost? What is the fee for replacement passes? Because that has been an issue in the past. It has caused some consternation that the parents have not been able to access the routes until August 1st. Just to let you all know, if you could do that a little earlier, that would really have helped us out in some of the questions that we're getting. But is there any type of media coverage, social media coverage, or some way to let parents know, other than this board meeting, that they need to be going online and they need to be checking these routes? The Metro, I think it was a great decision. I personally think we have enough time to if we get the information out and we work collaboratively with our city partners, which is the expectation, that we have enough time to really get parents on board. But I do think we need to utilize more engagement strategies and more information strategies. So my question is around the district and what are we going to be doing? But I do want to give Metro the opportunity to help us because we specifically asked last year for your capabilities and to see if that's even, if you have
So great questions. I'll start and then I'll hand it over to my friends at Metro. But back to your initial question is when you were asking, or when the board was asking some of those initial questions, our ability to navigate from just having a pass that you can just wave at a driver and get on a bus to go anywhere you want over any period of time you wanted to right now we have what I'm going to call is a hybrid model in which they're using the fare box or tracking students down to who they are and where they're going. I think over that time, it's been both a learning curve for both us and Metro on what the system can do and what do we want it to do. So not taking away from your earlier questions, we just didn't know the answer as we were navigating through that process. So don't want to take away from your question and needing to know when that information was asked, but we're still navigating and we're very happy to be able to stand this up from the end of last year to the beginning of this year. So I'll let you answer some of the more specific on what the
sure.
parameters of the software can do.
For sure. Thank you, Mr. Burkhart. So first, in terms of the time of the pass validity, the pass is programmed now to work between 6 a.m. and 9:30 a.m.
Okay,
the morning commute time. It won't work between 9:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. as you suggested. And then it works again from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. That evening cutoff time used to be 6:30. It was requested by CPS and by others. Can we look at maybe making that earlier in the day? Metro did a analysis looking at every high school, every dismissal time. What if that student missed the first bus and had to take the second bus? What if that student had to transfer downtown, right? And maybe they just missed that transfer. And so they got the second transfer. Our analysis showed that we could get 99% of those students home, that they could board their last bus by 5 o'clock. We could get 100% without a doubt by 5:30. And that was the decision that CPS made and requested that Metro move the time from 6:30 to 5:30. So on the standard pass, those time periods are encoded into the pass. And as you suggested, if somebody wants to use the pass in the middle of the day for a non-student purpose, it won't work and they would have to pay fare. We also have the extracurricular pass, which we're using to assign to specific students that may have needs outside of those two peak periods. Extracurriculars, virtual school, students like that who might not fit into those specific timeframes. But again, they will be assigned a pass with an ID and that will be tracked in the system. I think your second question was about, well, why could our technology limit those routes, right? I think we had a policy question about that and then also a technology question. The answer with the technology is that our current fare box and its 20-year-old technology, we call it a smart card, but it's not all that smart. It couldn't do that for every single student. And then the maintenance of that data, when students move, when students go on Tuesday to maybe their grandmother's house and on Monday they go to their house, that's a different route that they would need to take and that pass wouldn't get them there. So in investigating that from a technology perspective, our technology couldn't do that for all 10,000 passes that we create. So what we thought was, we can't deal with 10,000, but in a given week, we may have a few hundred that go through Government Square. We can capture that data. We can work with your administration to see if are those the kids that should be downtown? Should we ask them, do you need to go downtown? That's a question for CPS and your administrators and parents. But we're using the technology we have to capture the data we have to work with a few hundred students instead of 10,000. I think your next question was about activation and reactivation, right? So now that each pass has a unique student tied to it. If a student says, I lost my pass because I dropped it on my way to gym and it's on the floor, I couldn't get to school the next day. We are doing constant gardening with CPS administration. When they let us know to reissue a new pass for that student that dropped it on the floor, we deactivate that old pass. So we are really upping the game in terms of the oversight and the accountabilities and the processes as it relates to pass use and ownership, if you will, by the students. I think John can speak a little bit about the information we provide. The Metro website is up to date as of today. You can go on to the student section of the Metro website. All the information that we talked about today is there, including the pastimes and all the features, the trip planners for the parents, and so on and so forth. One thing I think it would be important for the board to know, CPS and Metro together created 10,000 passes last year, right? So 10,000 students used a CPS pass, roughly, ballpark. Of those, about 1,100, 1,200 or so were 7th and 8th graders, right? We didn't have any issues moving those students through the system. We anticipate maybe another 1,000 to 1,400 new 7th and 8th graders. We are fully confident that we'll be able to handle that, roughly 10% increase in student population on our system. And most of our 7th and 8th graders, mine included, very able to navigate the Metro system with the help of their friends and family.
And just one other point for families looking for information about riding. I encourage you to go to Metro's website, go-metro.com, and sign up for customer service alerts. So if there is an issue with the route, something needs to detour, there's traffic issues, accident, the bus didn't leave the garage, whatever that is, you get a real-time alert via text and or email. So as you plan, to get the students off to school in the morning, if you got an alert for your bus, you get the alert right there on your phone, information to board the next bus that's coming, that sort of information. So please sign up for that real-time customer service alert service.
And one last
Yeah.
thing, how do parents that can ride the bus the first week for free, how do they get it? Do they need a pass? How
They do not need a pass.
Okay.
Just board, tell the driver why you're riding. You're looking for, information about how your student navigates the service. They want to see it. They want to get comfortable. Our drivers are expecting that. They'll all be aware. They'll all be looking for it. We've done this in years past too. So we're used to that. We expect it. We welcome it. No pass needed. Just communicate with the driver when you board.
Well, thank you. I know the feedback that I got from drivers was like, hey, yes, let the parents come on the bus. So for sure, thank you.
So I want to first start by thanking both of you all for coming tonight. This is the second year we've had, I think maybe actually the third year that we've had Metro come to our meeting and walk through some of these processes. And I think that is indicative of the work that you all are doing to provide the best service possible. And so I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for that kind of upfront. I want to also maybe point out something, and I think this is more towards to Chief Burkhardt and to the superintendent, but I think this is probably something General Counsel can also chime in on. But the difficulty that we have as a district in providing bus service to folks who are not our students, again, to the students who are not our students, is that we are so dependent upon their schools sharing information with us that their students need transportation. And we year after year after year have to basically beg, plead, and cajole folks to give us the information they should be giving us. And when we don't do it, we set ourselves up for issues within the state because of the way state law makes it a problem. And I think I stress this because I know a lot of folks think about this with other districts that are in suburban areas and other places that have kids that are going to other charter. We have a large amount of land that we cover that we're providing bus service to. And it frustrates me that someone at another school or at a charter would not provide that information as fast as possible to ensure their kids got bus service as quickly as possible. So I wanted just to say that first, because for the life of me, I don't understand why we still have this problem year after year after year. For folks who—
Thank you.
It's just, I don't understand it. I really don't understand why someone would not provide that information sooner than later. The second thing I want to say though, and I think this goes to a little bit of the conversation around the narrative that is said about our students on Metro versus the reality of what our students on Metro are doing. Because the narrative so often is that our students are the ones that are causing problems at places. And the reality is they're not. And the reality is that people have been riding the Metro for year upon year. I mean, I thankfully lived like less than a half a mile from Walnut when I was there, so I didn't get to ride anything. Got to walk and watch all the folks ride by me as they hit it off. But students have been catching the Metro for years and not had problems. And folks have used the Metro to go down to work after school. They've used the Metro to go to after school programs. They've used the Metro to come back to campus to go to watch sporting events. They've used the services for years. And we didn't see these, blatantly kind of conversational points about how bad our students were on the bus. And I think from what I'm hearing from you all also is that we are seeing the ridership there, and we may see an increase with adding 7th and 8th graders to it, but that we are not seeing some huge concern for safety by our students. So I think that's, again, it's sometimes we have to clear the narrative out in some of these spaces. The last thing I will say is that I think one area that I do think will be helpful is in those conversations that you're having at the schools or in their open houses to provide as much information as you are already doing here with folks on how to utilize Metro's resources on their website, I get concerned that we are asking a lot of our own internal folks to do stuff with external resources when their external resources are already at the table there with us. And so I love that idea that you are providing good access to folks at open houses, providing information to them, giving them as much information as possible. And I think that really works in tune with what we're doing from operations to really make sure that we're getting one consistent message out. So I want to thank everybody for kind of providing that, and then also just provide that clarity that again, still do not understand why our schools that are actually utilizing our resources to get them bus transportation don't seem to want to do it quicker and earlier for their students to have clear understanding of where they're going.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Member Mapp?
Yes, thank you. So thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. As we speak about transportation as a district as well as the city, we do take on a lot of onus, right, to make sure that we are accommodating our students to have safe rides to and from schools. And I think another part of that collaboration is making sure that our students and our parents are thoroughly engaged in that process. So I appreciate you all sharing the different ways of keeping our students and parents informed and engaged, and also talking about what the expectations are. I've heard you touch on, the open house, but I am curious to know about what does that continual engagement looks like to ensure that we're just not hearing the expectations, or the students are not just hearing the expectations, but they're able to really embody that, really own that. And so we can still ensure the safety as much as possible, because again, it's a collaborative effort, not just from CPS, not just from the city, but from all constituents. So I'm curious to know, what does that constructive engagement look like throughout the year?
Yeah, so I'll just start and then pass the mic over, but I can honestly say over the past year and in the previous years, Metro folks have been boots on the ground at schools, not only at the beginning of the year, but all throughout the year. And so I've seen that firsthand, so I can stand up here and say those folks are not only at these sites, but they're also riding the bus and doing audits and making sure that they're putting money where their mouth is to say, if it is safe, we have boots on the ground saying it's safe. So from that standpoint, I can attest to that happening. I'll let the folks from Metro speak more to that and what.
You're right. I guess there is no end to the riding year, right? The school year might end, and just with the start of the school year, that's not the end of the engagement. You realize that transportation needs are going to change. You pick up a fall sport, you drop one. You move during the school year, you transfer schools. Somebody comes into the district and needs re-educated or newly educated or informed about how to use the system. Those efforts don't stop. Our team, CPS teams, have a long history of working together. It really doesn't stop. It might peak and have valleys in terms of the start of the school year versus say a mid-November, but it doesn't stop. We're here to answer any question. We'll come back here to deal with any kind of issues that arise. Certainly as the new technology gets rolled out, as the many partners that you mentioned continue to address issues regarding student transportation, it's definitely an ongoing conversation and needs change through the year. So the messaging and support needs to be there all the time as well.
Thank you.
And we also don't get to the point where we're adding routes like the 22 and 36 that we did last year without that constant collaboration and discussion. How can we be more efficient? We have a lot of conversations back and forth, both initiated by CPS and initiated by Metro, on how can we get students from point A to point B as quickly and as safely as possible.
Okay, thank you. My next question, so about the extracurricular passes. So I know that there will be two separate passes for the regular pass that's issued. So will it be the coaches or whoever is in charge of the activity? Will they be the ones in charge of distributing the passes to those students, or how would that be handled?
So right now, what will happen is the coach will give us names of students who need an extracurricular pass. We will pass that on to Metro, and then we will make sure that they have those passes. So if we know upfront that a student might be involved in multiple sports in multiple seasons, that pass is typically only active for that season that they're doing that extracurricular activity. So this new system gives us the ability to shorten or elongate that pass as needed. which is actually something that we welcome and think it's a great idea for us moving forward to be able to have those passes available to those students when they need them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then the last question, so I know that we have the designated times for parents to ride. Is there any other opportunity prior to the start, that first week of school, for families to possibly engage, especially with the 7th and 8th grade, to practice ridership?
So we've informed our staff internally that next week, so the first 2 weeks that cover the first 2 weeks of school, so starting next week, and then that first full week of school, that parents can ride. And again, we also encourage folks to use the transit app or Google Maps to sit with their student and figure out how to navigate that system. And almost always, if there's somebody in the neighborhood who's using Metro to get to and from school. And so we're encouraging people to do that. I know today I heard that our comms folks have been sending the information and updates to our website to the CPS communication folks to do that kind of push that you had talked about.
Thank you.
Dr. Moffett and Vice President, and then I'll ask a few. Go ahead.
So I'll let Metro off the hook for just a second. And this is to Superintendent Murphy. Are we training our parents on Focus or Power School? I'm not exactly sure which one we're using. And can we put this information on our Focus so that parents can navigate the links? They don't have to listen to the meeting, and they'll already have a Metro link here. And also, with regard to the code of conduct, are we putting this Metro information in the code of conduct? And, or I know what we talked about the yellow, but can we add that? And then also, can we make maybe the students sign or the parents sign something saying that they've read it, what the expectation is from our student code of conduct? I'm just wondering, what I'm looking for actually is the data. So if we have a student who's causing some mischief on Government Square, we can go back to say, hey, you looked at the student code of conduct, you signed it. Hey, the parents, you looked at the student code of conduct and you signed it. Where was the gap? What was missing? So that's what I'm wondering. Can we provide the opportunities on our social media and on Focus or Power School, and then in the student code of conduct?
So as it relates to our social media and website, I believe there's already a link active about CPS transportation. I believe I looked at that last week. So there's an FAQ about the opening of school with our back to school packet. It does include the transportation information that does link to the routing, how to access the routes. We did have a conversation last week with Chris and I with Metro. We did call Dan in to see if well, that's a different level, but yes, we did talk about signing off specifically on the Metro expectations. Families and students already asked to sign off on our code of conduct. There is a page in the code of conduct where they have to sign off saying they've read it, they agree to it, they will abide by it. We do think it would be interesting to go ahead and add another layer specific to those young people for the buses. We did have that conversation, and so we definitely can do those pieces. Putting it in Focus, so I need Jeremy to maybe educate me on whether or not he's not here. We will look into whether or not through Focus we can have a field that has the students' bus route information. I believe when we had Power School in the past, we could do that. I believe it's there. In Focus?
Yes.
It's there.
Okay, all right. So then we just need to get
on
that
the left
information.
hand side. It's the bottom.
Thank you
Bottom
kindly.
left corner. It'll say transportation. If they click on that, they will be able to see the bus route and the time in the corner of where the bus stop is.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President?
Thank you, Board Member Moffitt. I actually was going to ask that same question and get some further clarity on the Focus, because as a parent, I do not know how to use Focus. I am locked out, so I will have to connect with someone to help me get into Focus. Thank you.
I have just a few questions. I think we've come a long way since the vice mayor's meeting at the city hall and a couple of other meetings along the way. And it's because of the technology and people working. I like the tone of what we've just been doing here tonight, much better than I liked the tone of the city letter that we received. And I hope that tomorrow, when we are in kind of the joint meeting or talking, this kind of mood, this kind of tone can be part of the city understanding what you all have been working so hard on and doing so well. I do want to make a real important point. Not all of the 7th and 8th grade students in Cincinnati Public are going to be going on Metro. Those students, and help me out, interim superintendent, those students that are in our PK or K8, PK8 or K8 are not going on Metro. Those students that are
K-12, K-12, and K-12, so that's correct.
So it's very important because out in the community, people are thinking all the 7th and 8th graders, and that's not it. It's also important to note that the law prohibits those other kids that are not our CPS students, but are at private, parochial, or charter schools. The law prohibits them from using Metro. Okay, so the additional cost, the cost for us to transport 7th and 8th grade kids to parochial, private, and charter schools is going to cost us it's not even twice, it's more than twice. It's costing us to transport our students. That's by law. So when we talk about those groups not getting the information to us soon enough, or having kind of a laissez-faire attitude about it, well, while they're protected by Columbus. Wanted to just pick up on this whole idea that we're responsible for getting kids to and from school. And Metro is financially the most efficient way that we can do it. Far more efficient and financially efficient of that, and less costly than our yellow bus situation. Want to also second what the interim superintendent mentioned about, I have no interest in having our staff be at the transit centers or Government Square any more than I want. No offense, Metro, but I'm not asking you to come and teach. So I'm not going to have us send our people to go do somebody else's responsibility. So I'm so thrilled to hear what you're talking about, that there'll be increased effort and we'll be able to manage our kids that don't do right. We can take care of that, but it's 40 years that people in the business community, business district have worried about, well, how many teenagers are on Government Square? This is not a new phenomenon. People have been worried about that for 40 years. And so recently it's kind of hit some worse bumps, I think, because of some bad incidents, but it sounds like you guys are on top of it, and I know the district is as well. On the yellow bus, how confident are you?
Actually, our transportation team has done a fantastic job in the time that they were given to route all the students. We know at the beginning of the school year, we will have a given number of individuals who decide to move, or I shouldn't say decide to move, but have changed addresses and haven't updated that with the district. And so they'll need a different bus route and or a deviated stop at the last minute. We are confident, though, that we not only have our staff in the CPS office, but the call center to handle that call volume. If you were to ask me this 2 years ago, I would have had very little confidence in this in school opening. Last year, I felt better. This year, I feel even better than I did last year. So it's going into this school year. I think we've done a lot of prep work through the year to get us to where we are now.
And the folks that will be answering the phone at the call center are the folks that are employed by,
They're employed by CPS. They're CPS employees. And most of them,
and have CPS bosses
yes, they have CPS bosses.
being held accountable.
Yes, and we actually get reporting every single day on the amount of time that anyone is actually on hold. So we go through that and we look at making sure that throughout that time that it's all hands on deck, that when call volume is high, that every single person you can answer a phone is answering the phone. And so we know the first couple of days are going to be a high call volume, but we know after the first week it starts to settle down, and by week 2, folks have settled in.
One last question for me, and if anybody else has any others, but the, not the promise, but the data that we received the last couple of years was there are very, very few of our Metro users that would have more than one transfer. Is that still a statistic that you can boast about? And we can say that this idea that the vast majority of the kids are having to make 4 transfers to get to, and you talk a little bit about what those numbers might look like and if it's still as good as it was or better.
It is. It's better with the addition of the 2 crosstown routes. What we know now is that it's well over 90%. It's in the high 90% of the students who can make 1 or 0 transfers to school. There are only
Excellent.
very few unusual situations that would require 3 buses to get to school, and it's very unusual. So we're in the high 90s in terms of percentage of 1 or 0 transfer trips.
And in the engagement, I think it's very important that families know, because I'm sure that it's not necessarily the word that goes forth about how long it takes to get to school or how many buses they've had to take. I think families need to know that there are really 90-some%, there's a pretty direct route and there's only 1 transfer or none. I mean, I think that's general information, not necessarily specific to the child or the teenager, but the idea that here's the reality, folks. And I think that should be part of the broader message. Yes,
Say
sir.
just to your point, after the school year gets open and we do have some data, we sit down with Metro and we look at the actual data on how many students have taken more than 1 transfer. And in most cases, almost every case, we've looked and said, well, they've taken a bus they didn't need to take to go somewhere else. So we actually unpack that data right after school opens, after we have a data set that makes sense. So typically it's the first week, we don't look at that data. Week 2 and week 3 and sometimes week 4, we put that all together and then look at that data. So to your point, yes, we do look at that data on a regular basis.
Well, in the communication, there's macro communication like that. There's mood communication showing cooperation, and then there's that specific piece for every kid. And I want us to be communicating on all those levels. Any last questions for this Herculean effort, sir? Mr. Finance Chair.
Just one question. It really goes to the point about when we get information as to where our student writers who are outside of the district or who do not attend CPS but live within our district, getting that information later based on their start of school dates. How much will that or I guess I can't say how much, but I guess will it have an effect on our ability to also process when those first couple weeks what our transportation looks like? Because if we have a school that doesn't start till September, where we may not know those writers until right before, that may change up a number of routes, I'm imagining.
Yeah, so some magical dates. By April 1st of every year, the non-charter and public schools are required to tell us that they require transportation. And so that happened this year. What they're not required to do on that date is to tell us which students we need to transport. And so that becomes that gray area that we have to wait until those students are actually populated in our system before we can actually route them. And so if XYZ school only has 12 students, we may actually deem them impractical, but by the time the school year starts, we can't deem them impractical. So we're kind of at a catch-22 there. We can't deem them impractical after the school year starts, but we didn't know that they only had 7, 9, 12 students that we needed to route $100,000 bus for. So that's where that give and take comes in, and that's where, sometimes Jen will get mad at me because I don't know exactly what the transportation is going to cost, but we also have those charter and non-publics that have a little bit more fluid than, our students who we know are in our schools and requiring transportation. Hopefully that answers.
Mr. Lindy.
Thank you very much. And I'll be quick because I know we've been talking about this for a while. Two last things. One was, I'm so glad the call center is ours. I think this is a great improvement. It's fabulous. Thank you. I can't tell you 2 years. This is not last school year, but the previous school year. I think before you were here, I can't tell you how many emails I fielded from people who had just sat on hold forever and were and there was so little we could do about it. I think because it wasn't in-house. And so I think this is great. I
believe I started 5 days before the school year started last year. So that was my indoctrination with CPS.
I just think that's a win on the board. All right. I think getting this in-house, I think it's a good thing. And so thank you. There's comment one. I think comment two, I think I may see this a little bit differently from our board president. I'm not concerned at all about the tone of the city's letter. Tone was very strong. I think to me that says this is something we need to take real seriously. And I would just say like if you read the city's letter carefully, they're quite clear with their numbers. These are CPS students. This was a significant increase last year versus previous years. It was an increase in juvenile crime, even as the overall juvenile crime rate in the city was going down. So I understand the tone is harsh. I would rather get an honest letter that is very clear about how concerned they are, just so we can level set and how big of an issue it is. And I think at the end of the day, for me as a parent, issue number one is student safety. And so I continue to be concerned that the city is trying to raise the alarm bell, asking us to do things, and we're not able to do them yet. It might be because we can't, and we just need a different and better solution. I come back to the challenge we're in because of the very small amount of time we've given them to work through this with us. That's our fault. So I'm hopeful that we can get to a good situation by the first day of school. I'm going to continue to be concerned until we're through the first couple of weeks and we see what happens. But I appreciate everyone's efforts on all fronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Vice President?
Yes, and probably my last question. Thank you so much for being here. How is Metro supporting our English language learners?
So I think we have a couple of methods that we use. I believe that all of our websites are translatable. If you go to the Metro website and click the translate button and there, that is a resource that's available. I'll have to get back to you in terms of what we do for an operator on the road. If he or she needs to interact with a student that speaks English as a second language or doesn't speak English, I can follow up with you with that direct information. I'll have it at my fingertips.
That would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, this part of the meeting is concluded. Thank you so much. That's applause honoring what's happened, not that it's over. So Interim Superintendent, what is the next presentation?
Sure, I'd like to give you an update around our school performance redesign, sustainability, and growth. If Rob, you have that presentation, it'd be very helpful. We'll start with the last time we were together, July 15th, where you had an update on phase one. Since then, it's been very interesting. There is a large group of people, it was mentioned earlier, who have been meeting together on a weekly basis. I believe the treasurer mentioned that earlier, to make sure departments are coming together to ensure schools have what they need for a successful opening. So those meetings every week started right away. And this week, the meeting is on Wednesday instead of the traditional Tuesday. And also since then, we had a visit to the new Schroeder Middle School. And in addition to that, we had engagement with the Schroeder Middle School students and the staff, both in person and done electronically by the board president, and in my absence, Assistant Superintendent Randolph. So on the next slide, there we mentioned the growth meetings, we mentioned the tour, and those meetings will continue. So we ensure that the schools have everything they need. There was communication from the CFT president about concerns. I believe that we have either mitigated all of those concerns, addressed those concerns, or in the process of addressing the concerns. The principal seems to have her arms wrapped around that building and the direction for that building. Next slide, please. Oh, and this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. I'd love to introduce to you our new Assistant Superintendent for Performance Growth, Sustainability, and Redesign, Mr. John Chambers. If you don't mind standing. And we are on time, scheduled to open, ready to go. Yay.
Thank you very much. So questions by board members regarding yeah, I guess the interim superintendent's report regarding the engagement, what's been going on and where we are in the move through schools. Well, I'm not going to hold it. I think that's great.
One of the pieces that came out of the community engagement was a suggestion, a deep suggestion by community and by the teaching staff would be to change Mount Washington from being pre-K 6 to pre-K 8. So we're hoping to have some of your time to discuss that tonight, if that's okay.
Yes, as your third presentation, I have kind of a script that I'll read from General Counsel's helping me through this to make sure that we do it all in a way that's appropriate. And I really appreciate Member Craig pointing out the issue of going to be changed grade configurations of buildings, that indeed that is board action. So I appreciate that. As far as I think we could do the discussion. This is what General Counsel thinks I could say, and I think it makes sense. Discussion and consideration of the administration's request to change grade levels at Mount Washington as a part of the larger plan, finding space for Spencer and reorganizing Riverview and the like, and the other two buildings as well. After discussion and presentation, and we asked the superintendent for the reasons for it from her point of view and also from the community engagement. And I think also it's been of interest to the teachers union and other unions as well to think in terms of those grade configurations for Mount Washington. After we have some time to talk about this, General Counsel has put together a resolution, even though we've not seen it on board docs before tonight. That was a matter of vacation on staff, I think, more than anything. We could put it forward if we wanted to as either a motion or a resolution. But right now, if you'll tell us why we should be considering this.
Two things the team thought would be very, very helpful is one, that this would present a balance, an opportunity for balance across our city. Right now, we have a K-8 building on the very far west side of the city at Sailor Park. This would, having one on the east side, provide a strong balance. It would also address some of the needs we talked about earlier, where when a school has fewer than 300 kids, it is very, very hard to provide the students with everything they need to be successful. We also had conversation around the sixth graders from Mount Washington just transitioning to stay there as seventh graders until it was time for them to select a high school.
Questions, Vice President?
I just have a couple of questions. So you may have said this already, but just to clarify, what would be the number expected if we're going from K through 6 to K through 8? And then second, you stated that engagement was done in terms of how this came about as a suggestion. Can you talk a little bit more about that engagement? And then in terms of the spacing, talk to us a little bit about that spacing and numbers.
Sure. So on paper, at one point, Mount Washington was listed as a school for 400. But then as we dug a little bit more into that with the support of the Federation and talking with Jeremy and really reviewing numbers, we got to a little bit higher, around 550. And so then we thought, well, maybe there is space available to assign the seventh and eighth graders to the building, which it would also be helpful for the Riverview East Academy students and staff, because that would give them more space as a 9 through 12 configuration. We also thought very heavily about being able to support the kids in the building at Mount Washington. And once there's an attraction for that school that's reimagined, we believe that more kids in that area will want to either return to Mount Washington or be a new family to the Mount Washington school.
And with the number, the capacity building being 550, what is the expected number for this year? If you would go up to the K through 8?
The K through 8 will get us to more like 520 for this school year. I believe that's, Jeremy left the kid on me. I believe that's right.
Perfect. And then last, can you talk a little bit more on the engagement?
One more time, I'm sorry.
Can you talk a little bit more on the engagement that was done
Oh, yes,
in terms of the
yes.
decision or the possibility of this becoming?
Yes, so we had sessions at Riverview East, all in person, where we met with the parents, we met with the staff, we met with the community, including their LSDMC. We also had several LSDMC, Riverview East Academy constituents engage with us through the online conversations that we had, and there were multiple, as well as in-person sessions. So they've had a multiple sessions where they could engage with us, and they raised the idea of it being K-8. The original plan was K-6.
Right. And last,
yes, ma'am.
What were any concerns
about the K-8?
Yes.
There was no concern that I can share with you. I think the initial concern was with me and the original plan based on a number I thought we had for Mount Washington being 400. But as we dug into that a little bit more, so that alleviated any concern.
Okay. And I did say last question, but this will be the last question. I know I had asked before in terms of as we're looking to expand or move children or grades, what would be the budget cost for that? Meaning there's going to be more students. So obviously there's more money that needs to be put into that particular building. Do we have an increase in terms of what would be needed for that?
That's a great question. And that's what Jen is building out now. However, let me say this, in terms of staffing, where we did add an assistant principal, it really did not increase the cost to the district because we pulled the assistant principal from Schroeder High School because they will now be 9 through 12. And so that third administrator isn't necessary. We moved that person because of the increase of numbers to Mount Washington. So not an additional cost. The teachers, we moved from Riverview East Academy. So we did not add any new teachers. So it's cost neutral, but we'll spell that out in Jen's document. She did have a cost for materials. Mount Washington is an expeditionary learning school, so they would need more materials for the new kids coming in.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Craig?
So, again, I think Mount Washington is a good example of a school where we knew that there was more space to be utilized by students in the building. And I think it's been a problem for a while that the students who leave at the sixth grade often don't stay within our district. And so I think there's some realities to that still may be a challenge to fight through as to what they go through after eighth grade. But I know a number of folks who live in that area who said that having eighth grade is something they would like. So I think it's good that we're coming to the board to have a discussion. And I think you actually answered one of the questions that I shared with you before with regards to kind of is this the permanent move? And then what's the expectation of allowing students who were in the sixth grade at Mount Washington to return back? Which I think it would be a godsend to a number of folks who have already said, just trying to figure out where my kid was going to go. But if they can stay right here, like I know where this school is, this is around the corner from me. I can get them back
We-
there.
We would absolutely be happy and welcome kids who have been Mount Washington kids to remain there, seventh grade, eighth grade. The principal at Mount Washington has been an angel in this process. Very open, very supportive, very accommodating, showing true leadership in this work.
So the one question I would have is just kind of the time frame of allowing folks who are going into that seventh and eighth grade who may be coming from Riverview, and actually even the K-6 kids coming from Riverview, the time to be able to go through, tour the building, be able to see what the building resources are going to look like, and also those times for those teachers to figure out, like be able to set their classes up, be able to have the time to reach out, because I want to make sure that we are not having a student who shows up on, kind of day one of class and trying to figure out where I'm going. And also with there not being a traditional seventh and eighth grade, that becomes even more of a kind of question mark as to where they are.
We have had the buildings open for teachers, faculty, staff, probably since the last board meeting. We would welcome students who want to tour, who want to meet the principal. They may not be able to meet the teacher right away, to be able to come to those buildings. We will accommodate that happening. That's a great suggestion.
And then the only other question or only kind of thought I have with all of this is that I think this goes in a little bit of us rethinking how we deliver education across the city, because part of the question we just had with regard to transportation costs is that we have a couple of schools where folks are coming from so far away to get to the school that that increases our transportation costs. And the reality is that as much as we can get those costs to be direct, the transportation needs to be directing them to schools that are within a reasonable area, that brings better efficiency, that brings better results for a lot of students who don't spend an hour and a half on a bus to and from school every day. But also is more familiarity with the parents to be able to know where their child is in school and know their child's routes and those type of things. Because some of the same issues that we were discussing with Metro and with our transportation needs are in part because of how far we are transporting a student to the school. So I think having the seventh and eighth grade will help with that. But I think it's also the next step for us is to think about, for those folks on the east side of our city, we got K-7, or we got K-8 now. What does the 9 through 12 look like for some of those students?
Absolutely. Very excited to engage in that work this year. We do have names from both CAS and CFT of people to help us with the middle school work. We'll take that to the next step and do that for 9 through 12 so that we know where we're moving to as it relates to high school students. And we already mentioned we were going to dig into the feeder patterns for our schools that will help alleviate how far kids are getting on the bus and being on the bus.
Thank you. Any other questions? Dr. Moffett?
So thank you for this. I was actually standing there when one of the administrators said, "Hey, can you consider K-8?" So I heard that firsthand. What about the only other question that we'll have to around the mental health provider for Riverview and Mount Washington? I think they had two separate providers. Is that
Yes.
right? How is that going to look? And then the other question that I have, I'll just type them both to you, is around LSDMC and PTO engagement. I know we had a discussion with some parents after the meeting, President Bolton, they were talking to President Bolton, and I was ear hustling. And so I came in and the parent shared that she was willing to, the Mount Washington parent shared that she was willing to be engaged, willing to stay in the district, but she wanted to channel that energy someplace else. So do we have a plan for parents that were super engaged or that just became engaged from Riverview in the elementary level to really get that pipeline at Mount Washington and to merge some of their clubs, merge their LSDMC and then the mental health providers?
So it's been really interesting how the principals have been talking and working with each other about how they're going to transition staffs in, how they're going to transition the students. And they talked about having anything from welcoming parties. They had lots of ideas. And so I'm a huge supporter of the LSDMC work. Our parent champion is in the room. I'm sure she took a note of that comment, Board Member Moffitt. to make sure that we're able to get and keep families engaged in those schools. Mount Washington is a community learning center, follows that model, has resource coordination, and I am certain and confident the resource coordinator can also help us in this process of keeping and getting and keeping those parents engaged and making them feel like they have voice and that they are a part of the school.
Got one more question around the strides unit at Riverview. We had a lengthy discussion with some of those teachers that had students in the elementary level. What is the plan for our strides? And I may be saying it wrong. Please forgive me. Our autism unit.
Autism. Mhm.
Our
Yes,
autism
ma'am.
units.
So you spent a lot of time with one particular teacher. I would love for you to have another conversation with him. I think that he is in a much better place right now.
Okay.
The principal at Evanston, open arms. We'd like to have the classrooms with us. And I think has created a very welcoming environment, rolling out the red carpet.
At Evanston?
At Evanston was one of the
Okay.
locations. The preschool class went to Bramble. I might need some help to make sure I'm telling you the right spaces.
From Riverview.
AWL, say 7th and 8th grade, went to AWL. There is also a middle school at Sailor Park. The 9-12 autism is at Schroeder.
Okay.
You asked me, Dr. Moffitt, please forgive me about mental health. I had a conversation, multiple conversations with Susan Shelton, the director of Mind Peace. She pulled together the two agencies that support, one that supports Riverview East Academy, the other that supports Mount Washington. They are working together and will work to transition students. I think there were about a dozen that we're talking about, but they felt really confident about transitioning students. They will provide additional support in terms of personnel to ensure that transition works out fine. If the family wants to continue with the services that came from the Riverview East mental health provider, we will be able to work that out. However, and if they want to go with the Mount Washington mental health provider, that is an option for them as well. They have been meeting and talking with each other about this transition.
Okay. I just wanted, those were some of the concerns that I had heard.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to make sure that they were addressed publicly. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from board on this presentation? I've been advised that we could pass a resolution or do it as a motion, and because it did appear on the agenda, we would not necessarily need a 48-hour waiver. Is there, if you review the resolution that General Counsel has written for us, again, it's my fault. This is largely because of vacation on staff. It didn't get quite done. I hope we've given enough opportunity for the discussion and we did get it on the agenda. We can, and I think that would be helpful if we have interest in doing that this evening. Give you a chance to review the resolution. Any other questions regarding the grade configuration? And I again thank Mr. Craig for bringing it to our attention, or bringing it to the administration's attention, and then the administration bringing it to our attention. Any questions about it? Do I have a motion to pass this resolution? Is that appropriate? Shut up. Should it be a motion, or tell me, just, I want to do it right. Okay.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Dr. Moffitt.
Yep.
Oh, and discussion.
Oh, thank you, President Bolden. I appreciate the update from Interim Superintendent Murphy. It was very helpful. And I will plan on voting for this tonight. I wanted to raise again my just increasing concern that we are making major long-term strategic decisions, not only without a permanent superintendent, but without having started the process of looking for a permanent superintendent. And I think that's a mistake. And so I'd be happy to vote for this tonight, but I think there will come a point where I will start voting against decisions that we're making if we have not even started the process of trying to find our next superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Any other parts of the discussion, questions remaining? Roll call.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Crossett,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes.
Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. Thank you all very much. And I'm sorry for my mistake on this one. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the interim superintendent?
So moved. I was trying to give Vice President an opportunity.
Is there a second before we have a
Second.
discussion? Okay, thank you. Discussion, questions for the interim superintendent or anybody else?
So,
Mr.
so,
Crossett.
so these recommendations are this I don't know, 14-page thing of all the different personnel.
Yeah, it's short
Sure.
today.
I was just kind of curious, if, in the future, would it be possible for this information to have some context? In other words, is our employee turnover more or less? Is it more or less than other major urban school districts? And maybe a little chart that shows our trends and what we're doing in terms of turnover might be helpful. So it doesn't really affect this vote, but I just a suggestion that could go along with this.
Great. Interim superintendent, does that make sense?
Absolutely. That won't be a problem.
Other questions, comments for discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Crossett,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes.
Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes.
Mhm.
Do I have a motion for the adoption of the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Mapp. Discussions for the treasurer? Mr. Crossett and then Vice President.
I just had a question. The the individual funds have a very nice, clearly stated purpose. What is there? How is what's the process to ensure that the money actually gets spent for that purpose? Is there like a internal review, or how does that?
Oh, yes.
How do we maintain stay in the lanes with all that?
So we have a grants team that has a compliance officer. So all grant related contracts and requisitions go through their team to check for compliance. You're welcome. President Bolton, there's a correction. The curriculum department was adamant that I make the statement. There's a then and now for Think Circa in the treasurer's report due to an error on the vendor's part on the invoice dates. They have since corrected it. So it's not really a then and now. They just didn't want to get in trouble and get blamed. So making that public announcement.
Can I ask a question? It doesn't make this be revised?
No, it just, the triggers are then and now because the invoice date precedes the
Gotcha.
purchase order date. And so they probably typed the wrong year is probably what happened with the fiscal year change. But
So it's corrected, it's not revised?
correct,
No,
correct.
correct, okay. Madam Vice President?
Yes, thank you, Treasurer Wagner. I just have a couple of questions. I always look at the vendors and the contracts and the amounts, and I always have questions. And I went through a couple of the different line items, and I know that a couple of them stated that they were either not being renewed or had a portion left of being renewed. And I just wanted to know the process in terms of possibly getting a list of all contracts coming up for renewal in regards to RPs. And I didn't know if you could further explain a little bit about the question that I had regarding payment to Oak Hills, Marymount Northwest, and then some of the Hamilton County Educational Services for our ESL students as well in the non-public schools?
Sure. So we typically issue 3-year contracts with vendors. And sometimes they will put in language in there that says we can have a renewal for a year or two afterwards. And that's usually because they're trying to, they would prefer to have a 5-year contract to lock in, right? But so typically every 3 years, those services go up for a new RFP. So that's what you're seeing in the treasurer's report. Some have differing lengths. The question you asked me about the other school districts comes from students who are either court placed or foster placed into another district. Because we're the residential district, it's our responsibility to pay for their education. And so we pay tuition. We have kids that have theirs and they go cross. But so when we issue those payments, they have to be recorded in the treasurer's report for approval. But a lot of what you see in auxiliary funds or non-public are pass-through dollars. So we're just the fiscal agent. We do compliance checks to make sure that they're spending the money according to the grant and proper public purpose, but it's their decision on what to spend their money on.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, comments? Member Moffitt?
I have two questions. I'm gonna ask my easiest first around, like on page 10, for example, under school and community partners, there's an invoice for Saturday Morning Vibe cereal bar. We gave them $3,200, but the invoice date is April and the PO date is, I think that's May. Is that because our fiscal year stopped in June? I mean, why is it so far away?
Probably because they had an invoice they didn't have a budget for and at the time, or because we'd already closed the year, they didn't have an open purchase order. So they had to create a new one. I can look up the specifics of that instance, but it could be that the vendor realized they didn't get paid and we never saw the invoice because it sat on somebody's desk. I don't know.
Okay, that's one I definitely have questions about. And the other one is I see Hamilton County or Hamilton County ESC quite a bit. Can you tell me what our total contracted amount is for them? Because I know they provide and this doesn't have to be a now question, but maybe in the future. They provide our professional development, right? Are they direct to student services or are they direct to the student or are they to our staff for professional development?
I'll defer to the
A
superintendent.
combination. So you'll find them going across multiple departments. And so some of it is direct professional development for staff. Some of it is, for example, student services. We do utilize some of the services for Hamilton County Educational Services Center with our students with disabilities as well. Just one example.
Okay. So I'm asking that question because a little ways back, I think earlier this year, we had, or maybe it was last year, we had a discussion around vendors getting multiple contracts. The previous administration was very adamant about cutting contracts that vendors had to across multiple schools because of a total dollar amount. And that was the justification that they used to get rid of some vendors or say that they needed to go through an RFP process. So I'm asking the question because I am wondering, did Hamilton County do that? What type of services are they providing? Because they're actually listed quite a bit here. It's not a criticism, it's just an inquiry that, they've got quite a few. So did that fall underneath the justification that we've heard before around needing to do an RFP, and then they just won the RFP? And then what's the total dollar amount that Hamilton County, that we spend with them?
So the ones that I'm seeing in here they reference the RFP number on there, so you can see that they did RFP those services and Hamilton County won the bid. Don't quote me on this, but I think we're up towards $9 million with Hamilton County ESC for all services. But I will get in an official report for you.
Okay, great. I would love to see that because, and it can be broken down in, services to students that impact students directly or indirectly, but I'm very curious to see because we spent a significant amount of time hearing previously how that needed to happen to get rid of some vendors, but I'd also really like to look and see that as well. Thank you.
Member Matt?
Yes, so my question is around the KPI info. So looking at the various reports, typically when we're seeing the KPI, the way it reads to me is that it's showing really a goal for the vendor, but it's not really giving any quantifiable metrics. And so I'm wondering, just in terms of trying to justify if we move forward with renewing a vendor, how do we support that from a board decision? Obviously, because we're not directly connecting with those vendors. So how do we get access to that information to see if they're actually meeting the goals that they're setting out to do?
So it's a great question. And, we're still teaching people the proper way to write those things. A lot of the vendors, you don't get the results until after the year closes. You already started a new budget and new stuff. So the timing makes it a little bit difficult. But we've been reporting out to Finance Committee monthly on different KPIs. And so I'm hoping as we refine our return on investment and key performance indicator data, the data that's present in front of you before we do the contract is more informative for you. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments before we have a vote? I guess.
Okay.
Let's go.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Crossett,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes, and I would like to abstain from page 8, line items 3 and 4. And page 9, line item 14.
9, item 13, did you say?
14,
14?
yes.
Thank you.
Page 9, line item 14.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Moffett,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. A proposed consent agenda has been distributed. Treasurer Wagner, would you please maintain the list of any exceptions and the exception makers? This is the shortest one we've ever had. Again, it's of the value of vacations, I think. I'm required by law to read it. Approval of minutes and business meeting, July 15th, July 25, special meeting on July 30th, and resolutions approving student eligible for subsidy in lieu of transportation for 24-25. Is there any exceptions to be made to this rather limited consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none from members, no reason from treasurer or superintendent. Is there? I see
So-
crosstalk here. I'm watching.
Yeah, so on the minutes from June 12, the COW meeting, where your attendance was mistaken. Those aren't in today's minutes. So we're just going to resubmit corrections for the next board meeting.
All right. So no exceptions. We have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second, somewhere.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Crossett,
Abstain.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes, and I would like to abstain from the business meeting for July 15th.
Dr. Moffett,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. And now we move on to our next topic, and these inquiries that have been submitted on the budget to preliminary discussion, yellow bus and other transportation update, back to school presentation, those were all moved up into presentations unless the interim superintendent or treasurer have anything to add that didn't get said tonight. It's hard to imagine that something didn't get said on transportation tonight. But
May I do a reminder?
yes,
Excuse
please.
me. So we are having a partner meet and greet at Washington Park at 11 a.m. Wednesday, August the 7th. We are also having the back to school address here in the ILC Thursday, August the 8th, 11 a.m. And then school starts Thursday, August 14th. That's all.
Questions, Mr. Craig?
Just and actually really more of the last part there with the start of school. I know we were switching over to, I think it's switching from Power School to Focus, and I know several folks have raised just difficulties and challenges. Is there somewhere they should be looking to, or somewhere they should be directed towards if they're still having concerns with getting like information out of Focus?
So we have been having focus training this week, keeping in mind a lot of our clerical staff just returned like Thursday. So we do have training out. Those dates are posted. There are some opportunities virtually and in person if someone has any questions about Focus.
So for, I mean, I guess, so for parents, if who have questions about like when information will be posted on there or those type of things, should those be directed back to the school or?
Jeremy, they can call the school and or the customer care center, I imagine.
Here it comes.
Mm-hmm. Or the tech support line.
Okay. I'll wait for Jerry to make his way up to the stage.
Sorry, since I came all the way down here. But yeah, just they can contact any of those for direct help, as well as all of our website now has been updated. So there's not a particular parent training like here's a focus training session, right? It's independent for the question that you're looking for. So if you would go to our website currently and say, I want to enroll a student, the instructions now flow through the focus program as to how you would do that. Each individual section has been updated so that you now have instructions on how to accomplish that.
Okay. And then so like if a parent, for instance, if a parent's not seeing information that when they are in Focus, they should more likely start with the school to make sure that the information's already been, that they have the most current information that's available at the time, I guess is maybe my question.
Absolutely. Again, or the customer care or the family technology support.
Other comments or questions? I have one, I think it's about, I don't know enough to use the right terminology, the platforms. I know there's some concern about a lot of the platforms are changing. And I know that there's some concern about whether or not we're going to be up and running and what to kind of expect. And if you could kind of brief us, I think that would be great.
Sure. Just a real quick summary. So we have officially made the migration from Power School to Focus now. Focus went live officially on July 15th. So all of our internal systems have been moved over. Teachers, administration, and staff had training at the end of last school year. As the superintendent mentioned, we have ongoing training essentially for this entire month, virtually every day. There is some option, whether it's volunteer, whether it overlaps with district PD for our staff. And as I was mentioning, all of the instructions have been updated now for parents. There is a lot of work that is still being done, obviously, and will continue to be done over the course of this year. With a system move this big, it is definitely being moved in phases. But for all intents and purposes, the main migration is completed now, and we are switched over.
Thank you. Any other questions about anything as the start of the year? All right. Thanks. Board matters, I think. Are we there? Yes. This actually, board matters. This is a carryover from the previous board meeting, which is a carryover from the previous two board meetings. And that was the need that we had decided in our governance effort to come up with 1 to 5 guardrails regarding our own board behavior. I don't know if anything has been submitted. You're kind of our rep, if you will, Mr. Craig, to Council on Great City Schools.
As far as I know, the same number of folks submitted stuff as they did the last time, which is 0. So.
But our behavior has gotten so really good just in the last, we've gotten Jim here and
Is this something that maybe other school boards have? We wouldn't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it is associated with Council on Great City Schools, that they have some good ideas. The only thing I ever have sent or suggested is that we operate by using our bylaws and try to live by those. But other comments about the 1 to 5, Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, thanks, President Bolton. I think, Mr. Craig, I apologize at our last meeting for having not done the homework. I take homework seriously, and I meant what I said. Since our last meeting, I did go back, and I looked at the self-assessment that we did at our last meeting. This was the one in July. And I think the self-assessment was not quite right, because I think our score should be 0. Because even in that, this is all going somewhere in response to the question that President Bolton posed, I promise. But even in that vision and goals section, to score above a 0, the board needs to consistently distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. I don't think we've done that in the last 6 months. So I think we have some regression in our overall score. So not only is it not increased, I think it's gone backwards. And so my takeaway from that was, I think some of the most value we've gotten in the past is when we've had a third-party facilitator who, to Mr. Crossett's point, has seen what's worked in other school boards and can reflect back to us, hey, CPS board, on fronts A, B, and C, keep doing what you're doing. This is great. As I look at other school boards and what's helped them make an even bigger difference for children, I think E, F, and G would be great things for you all to try for next time. And so I'm all for moving forward with this, but my perspective is it's only going to have an impact if we can bring in some fresh eyes who is not a board member, and has some experiences both with us and with our needs, but also has seen what's worked in other districts. I think we got a lot out of the work with Ray and Cindy when they were our third party eyes, and I'd be very excited to continue that. And frankly, I think I happen to find their model clear and simple and helpful, even if it were not that particular group. It's really the presence of the third party that feels like it would do some work from my perspective, rather than a one particular framework versus another.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Any other comments about our 1 to 5? Dr. Moffett?
Well, I appreciate my colleagues' perspective. I think that if I remember correctly, Board Member Weinberg submitted for review a sample of a respect policy or a respect, something
Mutual
regarding respect for our colleagues. I don't remember if that was this year, if it was last year, but I think that's what the A is actually referring to, is developing guardrails on its own behavior. And so we did have an example provided to us by a colleague. I don't exactly remember if everyone was on board. I think we talked about it one board meeting, but we didn't really expand on that further. I would be very interested. Clearly, there was more than just one person that felt that was needed. To your point, some people just feel like go with the bylaws, but there was a need for some sort of guardrail written around respectful behavior. So I don't know if we need a third party to do that, but we have had examples brought up by our own members around potential guardrails that we could use. I hate to say the word policing because it shouldn't have to be that way, but just formalizing respectful behavior and communicating with each other and in the board meeting. So I think that we can go back to that example. I don't remember when that was submitted. Do you remember, was it last year or was it?
I do not remember. I'm trying to find it now.
5 months or so.
Yeah, it was a while ago. But
Yeah, we've talked about it multiple times, and then I know last year we talked about it, and then Vice President Weinberg actually could talk to other boards, and I'm not sure if it's Akron or what other board, but when we went to OSBA last year, we met with some board members around that, and they gave us a sample policy last year. So we talked about it, for quite a while. But I think that the point is around developing guardrails on its own behavior. And to my knowledge, we've not had the Council of Great City Schools or any other entity provide us with that. That was a third party that we were paying for. So we tried to do that on our own.
But before I go over to Mr. Crossett, there's a couple things. We no longer have the governance contract with Great City Schools. We have our membership. And the several things in their last advisory to us included develop a consent agenda and manage, as you were mentioning, keep track of the time that we spend on those items that are of importance is one of them. And then the other one was to develop guardrails for board behavior. So I think that looking at their last evaluation of us, that would make some sense. Mr. Crossett.
Yeah, I like the language of a respect policy better than guardrail. But also I've been in other committees and served other places where there have been respect policies and what's kind of powerful is you have it and you read it out loud at the beginning of the meeting. And that's kind of a nice process. So I would be in favor of something like that. Least cost solution first, and we could probably develop that on our own and before we go to a third party. I mean, this is my first meeting and you guys are great. I mean, what a great team. I mean, this,
You're on best behavior because you're here. Yeah. Meetings.
I thank you for that, but you got to give yourselves credit too.
You're sweet. Appreciate it. I think it's a great idea, and I think we should recommit to and doing it. And the respect piece.
Yeah,
Member Mack.
thank you. I don't have much to add. I think everyone has shared a lot of the things that I was thinking, but I would be interested in establishing the guardrails. I know we have had conversation about it, but for me, I would, also like to see some examples or kind of get a framework so that I can then get my wheels turning about what, how to present some of the guardrails that you're asking.
We save this for our assignment, Mr. Craig.
So not to be the Debbie Downer of this, because I think it's lovely that we keep saying this, but when I said this in January, when we met about this, I said then that we don't follow board bylaws that we just created all the time. And we have this problem every single time we talk about these things because it sounds great and wonderful, but there's no mechanism to enforce, no mechanism to require or to qualify us to do these things and say that we did them. And so my frustration with this topic is because if we're not going to commit to doing it and holding each other accountable to do it, I think it's a waste of our time when we have so many other things that are more important to be doing right now, including preparing for next year's budget, which we already know is going to cost us more than this year's budget does. So I get it. Like if that's the will of the board, we're going to do these conversations around respect and all these other things. Let's do it true. We made communication agreements. We made all these other things with the last administration as well that we did not adhere to as a board. So I just think I think it's great. And I love Jim here. And I love that Jim likes all of us and has positive opinions about all of us. That's wonderful. But the reality is that we did not follow these things. We did not do these things. And that if we commit to doing it this time around, that is great. Let's do that. But then let's actually live up to it. Because that's what my frustration is not committing or not doing creating a policy or creating a respect policy or whatever. Because I talked about it before and I talked about the things that I wanted us to do. But the reality is that we don't follow it when we create it. So that's my frustration. And that's why I will go with the will of the board, but I think that's just the reality is like, we can talk about it Pollyannish, but we don't do it.
I'm going to recognize myself real quick to speak about something. First of all, we are abiding by the bylaws. And I'd be happy to have anybody have a litany to tell us where we're not abiding by the bylaws. I'm very happy to have somebody tell me that. I can come to a few examples when we have not abided by the bylaws. And I'll leave it at that. I do think a respect policy, a mutual respect policy, a short how to behave as grown-ups, elected officials that respect one another and have to do the people's business in the name of children and teenagers. I think there's something that could be of great importance written along those lines. But I'm not going to sit here and have everybody keep telling me that we're not abiding by the bylaws. We spent 2 years rewriting the bylaws. And we are abiding by the bylaws. There have been some individual exceptions that we don't need to go into now, but I think of the idea of mutual respect, our mission as grown-up people, I think we should do something. Write it. And make us live by it. We're the only ones that can make us live by it, because the only people we're beholden to are the folks that vote for us. Those are my bosses. Vice President, did you find that?
I did not find it, but I know that you said that we really don't want to kind of go into further detail or conversation, but I do have a question for Board Member Craig in terms of holding individuals accountable and following the bylaws. I would agree with you. I do think that this whole entire board, that is something that we should be doing. And I will say we do for the most part, but there are times that we do not. And I think putting that out here right now and making it known and figuring out what are the next steps that we are going to do, especially with a new board member right now. I'm a rule follower. I'd like to go by the book. And I would like to make sure that we are going to be doing that moving forward. So saying it, yes, I know it's easy to say it, but now it's about doing it and really ensuring and calling each other out. Let's say, for example, if someone isn't, then that person needs to know. And maybe that person is not aware. And I think we have the right as a fellow colleague to hold people accountable. And I think that we should do that.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Member Mapp.
So yes, so just in hearing Board Member Craig's response, one of the things that I thought about, I do think that it's important for us to establish the guardrails. And again, I look forward to having the opportunity, if that is the will of the board, to work on identifying what those are. But the reason why I think it's so important is because we've went to our community and our community has established goals and guardrails. And so we've expected our community to give us input on how we should make sure that we're being accountable and serving our students as well as our families and everyone within our district. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're modeling that same level of behavior and congruency. So if we cannot do that, then that is very telling, and we can expect to hold those within our district accountable as well. So that's my take. I think it's the right thing to do because, again, as leaders, we have to be an example.
Thank you, Member Matt. Other comments, questions? We move on. Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, so many thoughts. I'll try to be real brief. I think I just appreciate what my colleague, Mr. Craig, was sharing, and I share his perspective that we do not follow our bylaws. I understand that's different from Ms. Bolton's perspective. We're allowed to have different perspectives, and I'm going to share that mine is in line with Mr. Craig's. I think even just the disagreement in the last 15 minutes is evidence for my point that we need somebody in here who's not us. Because this devolves really quickly into a he said, she said piece. And there's power in a third-party independent perspective. I'd also add that if you just look at the length of our board meetings over the last 6 months, and you were to total up the amount of staff time that is spent preparing for, executing, and doing follow-up on those board meetings, I'm hard-pressed to imagine that that is the greatest use of resources in our district when it comes to making results for children. So I would just say again, I think I am here because I am not giving up on this group and what we're trying to do and what the city is counting on us to do. I also think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we'll be able to do that better if we bring in people who can give us feedback based on what they see and what's worked elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Any other comments, questions? Then we go to very important as well. Board discussion on the frequency of the updates from the administration on goals and guardrails. Superintendent, do you have something to share with us? Because I know we all want to discuss this. So give us some ideas.
Very excited to have the former principal from Roe Hill Academy Vicky Graves Hill begin to lead the work around the goals and the guardrails and the monitoring, and would respectfully like to ask for consideration of maybe quarterly presentations around our goals and guardrails.
Board reaction to quarterly updates regarding goals and guardrails? Mr. Craig?
I guess so. Kind of two thoughts on this. One is, or two questions. I said, one is are you proposing that we would have like one meeting a quarter that would be all the goals and guardrail updates would be done at one time? Or are we saying like a phase of updates quarterly?
I do think a phase, because depending on what the goal is, there may not be data available. So for example, third grade reading, we may not, that kind of thing.
Okay, because I was gonna say, I think some of the interim goals are kind of spaced out, not even quarterly, actually. I think they're probably like half a year anyway. So like some of those may not need to be adjusted really, whereas others, certainly there can be some look at that. I think the other thing is that, and I think we've talked about it before, but the Student Achievement Committee of the Whole meeting was part of what we used to use some of that time for, was on the student achievement data. And I think that can be something where we might rethink how much of that information can be shared in that meeting to make that meeting more dedicated to data results, that type of thing, and less towards some of the other business stuff that we were having to do during the budget time. So I think that may be another way to help resolve some of that thought is again, still spacing out, but maybe phase it into that meeting more so than the board business meeting.
Thank you. Other comments or thoughts as to how it could be divided up? And I would say it'd be great to have some sort of a calendar or a visual proposal, because I'm having trouble understanding necessarily what that might mean quarterly, and I think that would help. I think I personally would like to have a broader picture rather than have it as fragmented, as it where it's piece here and piece here. I think that, very frankly, if I need to see the bigger picture, and that just might be me. So I'm anxious to hear what anybody else has to say. Dr. Moffitt?
So I think that I agree with you. There are some goals and guardrails and interim guardrails that we've just had a whole meeting to hear that we were on track, or that we were only increased by 0.1 or less than, it wasn't significant enough to me to justify the time that it took for to Board Member Lindy's point, for the staff to make the presentation and then have us come here and sit here and have time not being efficiently used. So for the ones that it makes sense to have a quarterly report, I would love to have that. I also am very interested in the student achievement data that we did not get enough time with. Particularly for me, it's discipline data. It's also building academic data, building discipline data. I'm really interested at this particular time because we're talking about quarterly meetings with the city, or at least every other month. And we need to keep on track with this discipline data. I'd love to hear regularly how many students are impacted with the Metro and how that is going. Promise Center data. I just think that there are other things that we need to hear that are impacted more regularly, in addition to the goals and guardrails. And so I would also like to see a calendar with it outlined around when the third grade reading scores come out, when the pre-tests are done, quarter one data for schools, quarter two, all of that should be reported to the board regularly around academics. But I'm also interested in the other things that we are also equally responsible for as well. So if it makes sense to have it quarterly, yes, but I also think there are things that we can be talking about too.
Mr. Lindy, and then Member Matt.
I'll be super quick. I just wanted to clarify that I think that the staff time I was worried was not a good use of resources. I was not referring to the goals and guardrails prep and meetings. I think that's probably the highest use staff time we could possibly have. It was really the time in our business meetings that I was referencing earlier. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Member Matt?
So yes, so I would not be interested in changing the meetings in terms of like the data presentations. So quarterly, I think we need to interface with the data as much as possible so that we know that where our students are tracking. And also I think that we can spend a good portion of our time in our meetings, which we should be allotting at least 50% of our time to focus on student outcomes within our agendas overall. So I would not be interested. I think we can look at utilizing our time a little bit better. But I would be in support of continuing to see the progression over time of where our students are, if we're able to use that information to predict the outcomes. And I think that's what our interim interim goals information is for as well, to help make sure that we have discussion about how our students are tracking.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Crossett?
Yes, I just want to, I'm new, but I think you're talking about with interim goals. I just want to get some clarification. So for example, 94% high school graduation rate by 2027. I would imagine that there's a lot of other indicators that we need to be measuring, maybe attendance and grades and other things that would be predictive of that outcome. And so they wouldn't, I really like the idea that we don't have too many goals, that we have some really big, high goals, but in order to achieve those, we probably need to be looking at a lot of other little things. I think you call them sub goals that would be indicators to know that we're progressing to achieve these goals. Also, when these goals don't necessarily, the one goal that has a percentage is graduation, but the other goals don't have like targets.
They do.
They do. Okay. Okay. Very good. The last comment that I have is the word, I'll say it again. I really do not like the word guardrails. I keep thinking about being in a bowling alley, it's like we can't even roll the ball straight down the bowling alley. And I would rather use some words like principles or values or standards, something that's more uplifting than punitive. If it's just for a discussion, we can talk about it another day, but so for whatever it's worth.
That's worth a lot. Mr. Lindy.
This is Mr. Crossett's raising a good question. I was going to ask, what kind of onboarding materials has he been provided so far?
Since last
week.
Thursday?
Yeah.
I would assume show up today has been it.
Look, you got to start somewhere, right? So the ID is a great place to start. I would just request between now and the next meeting, could he get a copy of the goals and guardrails from
Well, he put the agenda. He hasn't.
well, but to his point, like that there are targets. Those targets came from some careful thinking and research.
Onboarding. I think the person in charge of onboarding once was the president, but it's my understanding we transferred that power to Mr. Craig.
I was given no assignment to do onboarding. If you would like me to do onboarding, I would be happy to do it for Board Member Crossett, but it was not something handed to me at any meeting and or any assignment given.
Staff, board staff and board president and Mr. Craig will take care of the onboarding, literally onboarding onto the board. I want to respond to something that Jim mentioned that I think is important. One of the things I have as a longtime retired teacher now, and so I'm not in the war room, so to speak, any longer. But the way we track our movement to our goal is remarkably narrow. It is not a matter, and people have heard me say this, and I know it, and it offended everybody. It's not about the decimal point. If you want to have a 94% graduation rate, there are a whole bunch of big things to be tracking instead of small, narrow, pinpoint this percent. I don't mind having numbers, but as a person that spent 36 years trying to get kids to graduate well and have a great life and whatever while they were at school, graduation, you may not think that what we do has something to do with graduation, but everything we did today had something to do with graduation. Every single thing we did. It may not be able to be on somebody's chart to watch this number or that number, but getting our kids to school has something to do with graduation. Welcoming them back, everything. So I would like, I could do less, but I would like to see it be bigger in the larger picture of things. And I think most anybody that's been in a classroom knows it is not just watching numbers move that make the difference into our success. So I'd like to see you try to figure out something else. And I think we've got a diverse way to approach it. I think we can really come up very specific, keep up the same kind of routine, maybe quarterly, but I don't like to just be called together to watch this number move. Just, it's hard for me. Remember math.
So I appreciate your feedback, and I agree with you. It's beyond numbers, and you know that I am a firm believer in a holistic approach. And so we do have to consider other aspects, but I think the types of decisions that we have to make as a board, we have to have informed information. And so to wait quarterly, I think that does a disservice to the type of work that we need to do. And so ultimately, our main objective in terms of why we are here is to be able to identify what do students know and what will they be able to do. And so with that data, we're able to determine where our students are, how they are progressing, if we need to make adjustments along the way, how are we allocating resources? So that information is crucial to us as a board, but also as our community, so that they know that we are doing what we also said we are, tasked with doing also. So I agree with the holistic approach. I am, for that, but I'm also for making sure that we have a regular monitoring process.
Great. We'll find some unanimity. Go ahead, sir.
So I think two things in my head though is that, I think we committed to goals, guardrails when we went out and had conversations with our community and they provided ideas and thoughts to it. I think we have to honor that. And so I think that's something we've committed to doing. And so if we commit to doing something, we should then actually do it. Which is, again, back to my point previously. But I think, and looking at the prior monitoring calendar, nothing on here was done from a goals point of view, from the goals issues, more than once a quarter anyway. So I think one of the things that we can maybe look at is just if you want to put together a calendar, working with the team to say, here's what we would want to report this information to us. I think it helps us a little bit better to see that visually. Because I do think, like, for instance, getting reading numbers, we're not going to have it every time they take the test. So, and then we're not even going to have it when they take the test. We're going to have it when we get the results back from them taking the test. So, it's always been the fun part of trying to explain to folks that we don't know our numbers for the end of the year until like September, October, because we don't get those numbers processed and then from the state and then all this other fun stuff. So that's a reality that I think I trust the Superintendent Murphy will be able to kind of work through with her team to figure out the best ways to measure some of those different points. We also had the interim targets that were underneath it. I think it was a fair thing to say if there's things that you feel would be good things to keep us informed of and a timeline to do that. I just trust you put that together and you have a good team with you that you trust to do it. So in a lot of ways, I just, bring us the calendar, let us know when you want to do it. And that works for me. But I do think what we have to be careful about is that we did some of this also recognizing that we were it made a point of us focusing on things that would help the bigger picture. Because if we know that there are things that are not helping students learn, even on an incremental level, then maybe we need to rethink and readjust and pay attention to. And so that's how we got some of the highest math improvement numbers of any big district. That's how we're getting some of the reading numbers we're getting now, is that we're paying attention to things. That's how folks are starting to think about, oh my gosh, man, like doing this assignment here, I'm really starting to understand better. So I think it's easy to say we want to look at the big picture, and it's easy to say we want to look at the small picture. It's hard to see how those two connect when we don't have that conversation together, right? So I'm appreciative of all the ideas that we bring to the table to do it. I think there's a way to have the goals and guardrails conversations and the reality of us for the purpose of this monitoring the behavior and the opportunities to improve within our district and all these other factors. There's a way to do it that still incorporates what the superintendent will bring with her team and plan and give her the freedom to do that. That's part of the role. The reason we call it guardrails is that those are the things that you shall not do on the path to accomplishing the goals. Right. And I think we have to give that freedom to the superintendent to do that, while also recognizing that there are things that along that way we need to know whether or not we're even headed in the right path.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Other comments? I think this is a good discussion. I'm pleased with it. Give you a 360 kind of look where we are. Go ahead.
If I may, I do want to comment that I am very much a whole child type of educator. Having been in Cincinnati Public School, elementary schools, high schools, magnet schools, neighborhood schools, and through many iterations of how our state decides to test and what types of outcomes they ask for. And by no means when I suggested quarterly was I ever saying to give you less of what you need to be able to speak to the public about how we're doing as a district. That was not at all what that was about. Quite frankly, if every meeting you wanted me to bring you an update on some goal or some interim goal, you would have that. I just think that there are only 5 goals and there's so much more to our story that does not get told. And so we get weighted down with things that there's so many other things to celebrate about our staff, about our kids, about our community that I would like to bring out. That is the only basis of my suggesting a quarterly report in that particular area.
Thank you. And I think we are remaining, as I think Mr. Craig's pointed out, we are all still committed to our strategic plan. We are still committed to our goals and our guardrails. I mean, nobody's asking to change any one of those items, and that's part of our vision and mission as well. The next item is naming of schools. We have Bramble. I think some meetings ago, we did figure out from the community that they wanted to maintain the name Bramble. But the question was whether or not to add it as preschool. We don't know for sure that Bramble will always be a preschool. So one of the names suggestions as we need to have a sign is to talk in terms of Bramble Nature Campus. Largely because besides that building, we did buy some acreage at some great cost and effort and interest, and wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Then also we have as well the building that once housed Lighthouse and now is part of the other building. And so we have the building there, which was is housing 7th and 8th grade Schroeder. So for the board to begin to think about that, it's the board's responsibility to come up with a name. That Schroeder will 7th and 8th still has the same IRN. So it's not totally essential, except it is pretty hard to market something that doesn't have a name. So for our next meeting, maybe there could be some suggestions. Board members could come to grips with some of those suggestions. But I did like the Bramble Nature Campus. I think that makes sense for a sign. That way you're not limiting that building that we spent great money buying and great money restoring is necessarily committed, although I think it will fill as a preschool. But that's all I had to share for us to begin to think about that, because I think we do need names to be there. Any other items? Dr. Moffitt.
So just a reminder to thank you to Ms. Davis, our board staff, that there is a joint city CPS meeting tomorrow here, 6 to 8, Ms. Phyllis, or 6 to 7:30. And transportation is a topic, but I listened to some of the suggested topics from my colleagues, and so we have them. The city also has sent us some topics. This is in conjunction with the City Healthy Neighborhoods Committee, the Vice Mayor leads. We will be talking about some iterations of the transportation letter that Board Member Lindy referenced. However, I did send all of the board members and to our staff some other information for the meeting tomorrow as well. So please get in touch with Ms. Davis if you are able to attend. We do need a quorum, which is 4 members. Yep. Just get in touch with, let me just say, who can attend tomorrow? Let's just ask now. Mr. Crossett, Mr. Lindy.
We got
I'm
it.
sorry, Mr. Craig, Ms. Weinberg. It's the hair. And then President Bolton, myself, Member Mapp. So
We'll have a
we are
quorum.
good for our quorum. So I will see everyone. It will be here. It is open to the public. It has been noticed and it will be televised, recorded too, right, Rob? So it is here at the Ed Center.
Thank you for the reminder.
And then the other one is there needs to be a crosswalk at the Schroeder Middle School. So that was to Superintendent.
We'll get to the assignments.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Do any board members have any assignments for the administration or for each other? Now say the crosswalk.
A crosswalk at the Schroeder Middle School. And then another question is, are we hiring for crossing guards? Because I know Vice President Weinberg had someone reach out to her about being hired as a crossing guard. And so what is the process for community members, parents, grandparents to apply for and be hired as a crossing guard?
You want us to respond now?
General Counsel?
Yes, thank you. So an update on crossing guards. We have arranged for the city to continue employing crossing guards for at least through the first semester of this school year.
Okay.
We now have the responsibility of recruiting crossing guards. So we need to get out the message that we have the responsibility to recruit. They will employ and continue to employ at least for the next through the first semester. So that's the arrangement we've worked out to continue that relationship with the city at least through the end of the year.
So do they apply on the CPS website and then we send them there? How
They
does that work?
continue to apply through the city,
Oh,
but
okay.
we have to recruit to have people in place.
Is there a link on our page that we can direct people to so that they can actually not have to find it? It can be on the page directly? Okay, so
Here's the city gonna do.
we will have a link on our webpage tomorrow if you are interested in applying for a crossing guard, right?
Yes.
And I have a question for the administration. Do we still have the CPS buses? I shouldn't say they're little buses. The CPS buses didn't we have 16 buses, 1 per school? Do we still have those? And then what are they being used for? So what are they being used for?
We do still have the microbuses. That's what we refer to them as. Sometimes they have been used last school year to get kids to and from school. Sometimes they've been used for extracurricular activities after school to get our sports teams to and fro. And sometimes they've been used for extra things that we were doing in the district if we needed to bring a small group of students to the Ed Center or to another location.
But was it 1 per school or it was just we have access to them? So some schools might have 2.
The thought originally was 1 per school, but we've been using them in a variety of ways. So for example, if a football team needs to get to a location, we may have used a couple of them, 1 for students and 1 for maybe their equipment, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Think about the assignment then for anybody, other assignments? I would make an assignment that we'd like to know specifically how those all of our vehicles are being used. Because again, part of that was for health checks during the school day. So that would be an assignment. I'd like to see that assignment. Can I, question, the crossing guards, do we have a list of all the crossing guards that are currently employed by the city? So we have those. It's not like we're starting at zero. Okay, I think it makes sense to at least do what we're trying to do through a first semester. Because that handoff is going to be huge. We can't be behind the 8 ball on that. But we're not starting. The other assignment that I have is, and I think that Ms. Burkhart mentioned it, about safety. We are required by law to inspect all of the bus stops that we are using. And I have to always remember, and it's been through any number of superintendents, we've had to remind people. And I'm assuming we've done that already, but I think you almost have to fill out a form to make sure that you have. So thank you. That's mine. Any other assignments? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.